Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to begin the Planning Committee meeting for this evening. We have a fairly lengthy agenda. There's going to be some delegations, and there are some public hearings where people will be speaking at the microphone. In particular, I understand there's several people here with the telecommunications tower issues. You will have the opportunity to speak at the appropriate time, and that time will be shortly. But let's begin with attendance. We have everyone in attendance here, including Councillor Oakley and Councillor Pierce online. And I'm going to make mention to Lucas and John. I have a tendency to not see you, so if you have a question, I apologize in advance if I don't see your hand, but the clerk will keep her eyes on you, and we'll get questions or comments if you would just raise your hands. We do have a lot of people in the audience this evening, just so everyone is on the same wavelength or the same page. There are washrooms through these doors to the right. There are emergency exits both to the right and left. And I'm going to ask everyone to please turn off their cell phones. I say that every meeting, and every meeting someone doesn't do it and someone's phone rings. So please take the time to do that. And I'm going to turn mine off right now so I'm not the one that gets caught. Ladies and gentlemen, when we do have a large audience, it's very important to not speak loudly in the audience. Please be courteous and respectful to the people that are speaking. Please do not speak from the audience. Please do not clap, cheer, or do anything other than politely listen. And if you do want to speak at the appropriate time, you will have that opportunity. So let's try to keep the meeting going in a courteous and respectful manner. The agenda has been circulated. It's my understanding that Councillor House has a suggestion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Knowing that some of the people in our audience are here for the topic of the chicken issue, and noting that it's much later on the agenda, that could be a couple hours from now, I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to move it up closer to the timing of the delegation.
We have 4 delegations listed. Would it be appropriate to move 10.1 immediately after hearing the delegations with regard to the chicken issue? With that change, are there any other additions, deletions, changes? Would someone move the agenda as amended? Mayor Bailey and Councillor Bell. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Okay. There is the provision for the declaration of pecuniary interest. If you have a pecuniary interest, please declare at the appropriate time. If you know that you have one now, it would be the appropriate time. Okay, seeing none, if you do have a conflict come up, notify us, and we'll make the record show that. Now, I have spoken to all of the delegations with regard to the podium and leaving the microphone off and on, etc. So hopefully we can get through the delegations without any problems technically. The clerk is here to assist if you want the podium raised or lowered. Let's begin with delegation number 4.1, Brandon Crawford, speaking to the Committee on Backyard Chickens in the County of Brant. As Brandon is coming forward, I'm going to make him aware and everyone else aware, when you do make a presentation, begin by stating your name and your address for the record. Name and address for the record, Brandon. You begin.
My name is Brandon Crawford. I live at 86 Dundas Street West in Paris. Okay. Good evening, Mayor Bailey and the members of the Planning Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening in support of changing the bylaw to allow the responsible raising of hens in Brant County within all residential areas. Again, my name is Brandon Crawford. I grew up in St. George and have spent my adult life in Paris. And for the past 21 years, I've worked at Skedaddle, the largest wildlife control company in Canada. So I understand the concerns related to attracting wildlife, mice, and rats. The most common pest attractions we see are unmaintained properties, excess garbage in inadequate containers, bird feeders, open concept composting, hot tubs and heated outbuildings, and of course, poor building construction. To prevent chickens from being another attractant, the main thing is to eliminate access to the chicken feed, the scraps, and the birds themselves from larger predators. This concept is already being done with our outdoor rabbit hutches. With pest-proof coops and runs that are well maintained, the responsible raising of hens can easily be achieved. 9 cities and counties in the area are already doing this effectively. And there are knowledgeable members of the community that are willing to advise on education and how-to materials. I gathered 100 signatures from people in my neighborhood and around the area in favor of option 3. Most of them didn't know it was against the rules to have backyard chickens in Brant County. Keeping in mind that not everyone will want to participate, we are looking for option 3 from the Agriculture Advisory Committee to be approved, to permit chickens within all residential areas and zones subject to specific regulations specified in the bylaw. Some of those bylaw regulation considerations could be a permit required from the county. Bird allowances. Most of those 9 communities are doing 4 hens, no rooster to avoid noise pollution. Pest and rodent-proof coops and runs. I think this is key. And possibly bylaw inspection as a part of the permit request. In terms of education, ownership, and maintenance, would require regular cleaning of coops and runs, fresh food and water made available daily egg collection and cleaning, and possibly diatomaceous earth treatment weekly to avoid bird mite infestations. Backyard hens done responsibly can be achieved. Thank you for taking the time to consider this matter, and I welcome any questions. I know there might be some in the pest side of things.
Thank you, Brandon. Just stay right there. Members of the committee, this is the opportunity to ask questions of clarification. You will have the opportunity to deliberate and make comments on the issue at the appropriate time, but this is the time for questions of clarification to the delegation. Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Brandon. Thanks for coming in, and I do want to lean on a little bit on your professional background. I'll be the first to admit that the rodent issue has been one of the things that's made me reluctant on the topic of backyard chickens, but I'm educating myself a little bit more. I wonder if you can tell us, go a couple steps further on talking about, like, in any municipality where there's 2 rivers, there can already be a rat problem. That's reality. And about in residential areas within reason, yard size regulation, and you're very clear about that, which I think is prudent. And then you also include a long list of petition of people who support this idea. Would it be fair to say that some of the people who may have signed the petition might not have sufficient yard size?
It would be fair, absolutely.
Okay, so and was there any
depending on what that parameter is? I don't know.
That's
of course.
That's still an unknown.
Again, if we might just, rather than have a discussion, questions of clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I heard 2 questions, one with regard to the petition, one with regard to he wants a little bit more on the rodent issue.
Well, with the rodent issue, yes, there's going to be rats, there's going to be mice, there's going to be wildlife. It's attracting, those animals being attracted to certain areas is because of food and leftover garbage and things. If those things aren't there, they're going to go into that. So if there's a yard and they've got chickens and they've got feed in there and water and food, but they can't access it, they're going to move on. There's no place of harborage for them. They're going to go, they're going to smell it out, and they're going to go away and go to some other place. It's when they have access to it that once they get it and they have access to it, then they'll keep coming back, and then you get into population increases and things like that. So if you eliminate the ability for those animals to get to that, then it won't be an issue in those yards.
And with regard to the petition?
Yes, yes, of course. Some people that sign the petition might have smaller yards than are required, but we don't know what that size is.
Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To you, to the delegation. You mentioned bylaw. Can you elaborate a little bit more on where you were coming from?
With the bylaw inspection?
Yes.
I would just think that if we were to be allowed that, maybe, you know, for those people that are usually serious about having chickens. It's not just a thought saying, oh, I'm going to throw a couple of chickens in the backyard. And if you're going to be, building a coop and a run and doing this properly and responsibly, it might be something that the county could say, okay, well, you need a permit to do this, which other communities are doing. And then with that permit, maybe a bylaw inspection is part of that as well. So they can come, you have all the things you need to do it properly and responsibly, and then once you build it, the bylaw would come and take a look at that and say, okay, that's approved for the permit. Is just a thought.
Any other questions, clarification? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Brandon. Brandon, what would be your best guess of the minimum yard size you need to accommodate your vision of backyard chickens?
Well, in my research of this, I found that each hen would generally requires about 4 square feet of yard space to be healthy and happy, and I think it was 8 square feet of run space per bird. So we would have to do the math on that. I mean, it's if it's 4 birds, no rooster, and you're 4 square feet a hen, you're 16 square feet of ground space. Again, that's in research, and that's on Google. I'm not the professional of the matter.
So if I may just push you a little harder.
Sure.
So how big should the yard be to accommodate it?
Like maybe 20 by 30, okay. Potentially.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Again, I apologize to Lucas and John. If you do have a question, I almost forgot about you, but I see no further questions. Thank you very much for your presentation.
No problem. Thank you very much.
Our second delegation is Dave Kerr. The clerk has asked how we want to deal with the delegations. I suggest that we deal with it at the end of all the delegations and we don't interrupt the process. Mr. Kerr, you have the opportunity to speak to the committee for 10 minutes.
So my name's Dave Kerr. I live at 571 Paris Road. We are zoned rural residential, and so we're not exactly in the city. But based on the fact that we are rural residential, we have 0.6 of an acre. I have nothing behind me and basically one neighbor. I've actually had chickens for 3 years, and I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to. So the bylaw officer has been over to inspect the coop on more than one occasion. And I spent copious amounts of dollars. The chickens do not free range because it's very dangerous, and all the wildlife that are out there will be enjoying chicken for lunch if I turn them loose. So they are in a secured place. I use diatomaceous earth on a bi-weekly basis. Their coop is cleaned every 3 weeks. Lots of, the shavings go in. The eggs are collected daily. I mean, all of the things that Brandon had recommended we're already doing. And I guess it's a sustainable food source. I mean, really, it's what it is. I've also done meat chickens, which I'd like to continue doing, but it's just one of the things that my parents or in-laws live with us. They get fresh eggs on a daily basis. So do we, and my kids do, and I have a couple of good friends that help me out when we go to the cottage. He comes over and makes sure that the chickens have food and water on a daily basis and that kind of stuff. So, he looks after them, so I make sure he gets his share of the eggs and those kinds of things. So I know that there's people out there that don't like them, like my neighbor, and it's not my fault she's a vegetarian, but it's there really is a reason. I mean, we've worked hard at ensuring that there is no smell by using the shavings on a regular basis, keeping the coop clean, that kind of stuff. So we've gone out of our way. I do have a picture of what the coop looks like if you would like to see it, but it's I had it actually. We ordered it from a guy in Montreal, and he came and delivered it and set it up, and we spent copious amounts of dollars on it. But it's they're safe, and it's good for us as a family. The grandkids come over, they come over and give them treats, and they help collect the eggs and that kind of stuff. So it's been a family experience more than just, and I don't think it's a nuisance. They're not noisy unless something spooks them, or somebody throws something over at their coop. But other than that, that's what I have.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Again, questions of clarification from the committee members? Sorry, Jennifer. The other two blind spots.
You just have to reach.
I can see that there. I can see Dave and Steve, but it's hard to see the others. So don't be afraid to show
All
them.
good.
Jennifer.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to our delegation, to Dave. How many chickens do you have?
I have 10.
10. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and no rooster. Oh, sorry.
Mayor Bailey, and then Councillor Pierce.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the delegation, what would you do if we asked you to get rid of the chickens?
I would move them to my stepdaughter's place out in Norwich. She's out in Scotland. They live on a farm property, but
Thank you.
I'm counting on that you don't.
Councillor Pierce has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, you say you clean out the shavings, every 2 weeks. Of that, what do you do with the waste shavings?
I bag them up and then I give them to somebody to put on their garden.
So they're not put into the garbage then?
No.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Kerr? Thanks, Dave.
Okay, thank you.
The next delegation is Lisa Wood, Allison Fishburne, and Shannon Hendel, again speaking on backyard chickens. And again, if you could begin just by identifying yourselves and your addresses, and you have 10 minutes.
Hi, I'm Lisa Wood. I live at 212 Grand River Street North, just up the street. I bought a third of an acre property so I could have backyard chickens one day. And if you do decide in favor, I know that Lucas and Steve will be very glad that I won't be bothering them anymore. I'll have more to say, but our second member of the delegation is Allison Fishburne, who lives at...
I live at 39 Catherine Street.
And unfortunately, the third member of our delegation got sick and fractured her ribs coughing, so she won't be joining us today. And I'm going to begin and then pass it over to Allison. I'm here to enthusiastically support option 3 in the report on backyard chickens to permit chickens within all residential areas and zones subject to specific regulations specified in the bylaw, which is obviously key. I'm not going to take much of your time. It's been a long day, and the staff report shows conclusively that backyard chickens can be a benefit to our community and that the concerns that people have can be mitigated through responsible regulation. And we've already heard about some of that. Limiting flock size. I don't anticipate having more than 2 or 3 hens, and obviously no roosters. And people need to be educated to properly care for them. This is eminently doable. I grew up on a farm, and I know that as long as people have the right education, that we can make this work. But here's why I want chickens in my backyard. They're good for the environment. They are as local as you can get. They consume kitchen waste that's diverted from landfill. They reduce damaging insects like ticks in the yard, which I would be happy for because I have a long-haired dog. They're good for our health. Eggs from backyard chickens, because of the very diet, have more nutritional value than eggs from the grocery store, unless you want to pay $8 and get the free range organic, which I would prefer not to do. They're also good for your mental and physical health. There are therapy chickens. They've been shown to improve people's mental well-being. And also, I'm retiring in 3 years. I'm looking for something to keep me active and outdoors. And I think that backyard chickens would be a great way to do that. And last but not least is the cost. We all know what's happening with inflation. Backyard chickens provide a cheap, sustainable, inflation-proof source of healthy protein. So I'm advocating for option 3 rather than option 4. I can imagine sitting in your seats as committee members and council members and the mayor that you might feel more comfortable with option 4, which is a pilot project. As the previous delegate said, there's a considerable amount of money, energy, and I know I will fall in love with my hens, so I am hoping that this can be not just a pilot project where I'll have to relocate my girls to someplace else. And I'm also absolutely open on top of regulations. Paying a licensing fee. We pay license fees for our dogs. We probably, I know this is controversial, pay them for our cats. Sorry, no, okay, she's leaving the delegation right now. Anyway, I don't see why we can't pay a certain amount to show that we're responsible chicken owners, and so that we can cover any extra expenses that might come from oversight and paying the bylaw officers. So that's it for me. Thank you for your time, and I will pass the floor to Allison.
Hello. I'm a better expresser with writing, so I have a letter that I'm just going to read. Dear Mayor Bailey, and elected councillors, my name is Allison Fishburne. Among other things, I am a homeowner in Ward 3. Hello, Councillor Bell. And Councillor Pierce in the camera, wherever your camera is. Hello. We haven't met yet, but I hope to meet you in person someday. I am here today in favor of the opportunity to raise backyard chickens in Paris, option 3. I believe this is a watershed opportunity to promote the rich culture and heritage of agriculture in the County of Brant. As a member of the Arts, Culture, and Heritage Steering Committee that was formed earlier this year, I fully support initiatives that will further unify the entire county. Creating common ground, building connections across communities is imperative to making all of us feel seen and heard and valued. Backyard Chickens in Paris is such an initiative to create connections and a shared appreciation for what generations of families have been able to do with more land and inherited family farms in our county. I was born and raised in Central Florida. On my mother's side, I come from a long history of poor farmers. 4-H and Future Farmers of America, FFA, were commonplace in my family. To this day, my first, second, and now third cousins proudly raise livestock and grow their own food. My papa, my beloved grandfather, grew up going to strawberry schools where the school calendar is based on strawberry season, so the kids can be in the fields come strawberry harvest. As a kid, my Nana and Papa's backyard is where I got to watch and learn the toil, labor, and pride and joy of raising your own food and sharing it with your family and community members in need. As an adult, now joyfully making my life in Paris, Ontario, it's much colder than Florida, my dad, I am filled with such a pride and joy. Every season I get to dig my fingers into the earth, plant, harvest. I feel that I'm carrying on a generational joy and the lessons that I first learned in my grandparents' backyard in Central Florida. Whew, that heat, I'm missing that heat right now. I'm not prepared to own an entire farm. I don't own an acre of land even. I do have that 20 by 30 yard at least though. Thank you for mentioning that. I can utilize, just as my Nana and Papa did all those years ago, a backyard. Faithful in little, faithful in much, This is something I hope to pass on to my own children one day. This is my way now of supporting the next generation of farmers in the county of Brant. We have this opportunity to instill a deeper appreciation for agriculture in Paris and to deepen the agricultural relationships across our entire county. Thank you for your time and consideration of this chance to support option 3 for all of us.
And thank you, Allison. Members of the committee, again, questions of clarification to the delegation? I see no questions. Thank you very much. And our final delegation, actually, Patrick Draper is on the addendum. If you can't see it on the original agenda, Patrick is coming forward. And again, name, address, and you have 10 minutes for a presentation.
Good evening to members of committee and council tonight. My name is Patrick Draper. I live at 60 St. Andrew Street in Paris. I've been here for about 6 years. I'm going to throw cold water on this whole idea. I'm sorry to those who love it. Brant County Council has considered backyard chickens for over 20 years, consistently decided to maintain the current restrictions that limit backyard chickens to only agricultural. Why is this controversial issue being examined yet again? We already know it's a terrible idea for urban Paris. The staff report before you is missing valuable information needed to make a fully informed committee or council decision. Consider this. The adverse health issues are not to be underestimated in urban settings. My sister-in-law died because of backyard chickens. Her neighbor installed backyard chickens shortly after she developed lung issues. The neighbor completely removed the chickens, remediated the site. The house was sanitized. She suffered for 5 years and died. The staff report does not include any plans for community input through public open houses or online surveys. The staff report only proposes a communication plan after council approves the bylaw. Backyard chicken proposals have been a hot button issue with residents in virtually every single community considered this idea. So be prepared. Direct staff to conduct a robust public consultation process. Public Health Ontario produced a comprehensive study of the health issues and deaths associated with backyard chickens recently, September of 2023. Their main finding, backyard chicken owners have limited awareness of the human risk of infectious disease transmission. So they're not responsible owners of backyard chickens. The majority don't really know what they're doing. And why have new home developers placed restrictive covenants that prohibit backyard chickens on new houses? Well, I think the answer is obvious. Well, can owners in mature areas do the same thing by forming neighborhood committees to adopt restrictive covenants for their area? And there's the question about how many homes would actually apply for backyard chickens. We have about 6,000 homes in Paris. Are we going to get 100? We're going to get 300 applications. Staff report doesn't indicate any range. Toronto apparently has 80 backyard chicken homes. 80. 2.7 million people. Mississauga apparently has 4. So in relation, Brown County might get what? 1 or 2 applications. So why, if there's so little demand, would we spend all this administrative time, taxpayers' money, aggravation for such a small demand? And how many and what type of incidents and complaints with backyard chickens have been experienced in other communities? The staff report only talked about comparative bylaws. For example, Toronto City staff in April recommended an indefinite pause on Toronto's backyard chicken program, citing concerns about the rising cases of H5N1 virus, also known as avian influenza. This decision was supported by the University of Guelph Veterinarian School, who said foxes, skunks, raccoons are catching the virus. And more recently, we've seen the virus spread into domestic pets like cats and dogs. Earlier, Toronto Animal Services confirmed avian influenza cases in Toronto, and also Mississauga has confirmed cases. And there's a question of how some of your bylaws, if you go forward, are going to be resolved. For example, the noise bylaw prohibits persistent dog barking. So if I had a dog before my neighbor's chickens were added, and the chickens are now causing my dog to bark, who's going to be fined? I was there first, but my dog is prevented from barking, but the chickens are causing the dog to bark. Who's to blame? Who's going to get fined? Also, there's no mention of the lawsuits that will be filed. And if you search on the internet and on Google about lawsuits around backyard chickens, there are quite a few. There's issues around decreases in house value due to neighbors' backyard chickens. You put your house up for sale, your neighbor has chickens, there's not going to be a lot of interested buyers. If a dog crawls under the fence and attacks or eats the chickens, and there have been cases of this, legal cases, rodents entering adjacent backyards. Someone spoke to rats and mice and others. So if my neighbor has backyard chickens and rats come in and they crawl under the fence into my backyard and I've got a dog, who am I going to sue? And who's going to sue chicken owners that are non-compliant? There is an assumption in the staff report that option 3 is moving forward if you read the language very carefully, because staff asked for committee direction to develop all the necessary bylaws and regulations. Staff isn't asking for the committee to say, do nothing. I think it's premature to take this step without listening to the residents in Paris, not just the Agriculture Committee or those living in rural areas. Please direct staff to conduct a robust public consultation process. I would also ask that the committee use a recorded vote on the staff report about backyard chicken options. Thank you.
Are there any questions to Mr. Draper with regard to his presentation? I see none, no questions. Thank you, Mr. Draper. And that concludes the delegations on the list. And according to what we previously decided, we're going to deal with report 10-1 now. Okay. Yes, we should deal with that delegation. I was going to say dispose of the delegation. That doesn't seem to sound right, does it? Deal with the delegations. Councillor Coleman.
We'll move that we receive all delegations, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Coleman moves that the information provided by the delegations be received, seconded by Councillor Miller. Questions?
And refer to report 10.1.
All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Now we can have the report. And as the planner is getting prepared, I just want to thank the members of the audience for attentively listening, and that was an excellent way to present delegations, and I thank you very much for your consideration. Okay, the planner is prepared to proceed. Report 10-1.
Thank you, Chair and members of committee. I will try to be quick this evening with staff's presentation to support the report. I know much of what was both in the report and in the presentation this evening has already been touched on by the delegates. So I will try and make this as quick as possible, noting that this evening is a long one. So this item is before committee tonight, much as this evening has gone due to delegations received through committee in May of 2023, and staff received direction shortly thereafter from committee to prepare a report outlining options as well as other municipal approaches and possible considerations related to those options for chickens in residential areas. Staff is here this evening to present the report to committee. It consists of 4 options for committee's consideration, and I'd just like to offer some clarification that this is not a recommendation report. It simply offers some information towards committee for consideration and requests some further direction from committee to staff to assist in moving the project forward. So historically within the county, and I think it's been mentioned by some of the delegates this evening, Historically, the keeping and raising of livestock has been only permitted within the agricultural areas on lots zoned agricultural, subject to specific regulations, as well as provincial requirements for minimum distance setback guidelines and building permits where applicable. And the map this evening up on the screen shows shaded areas in yellow, which represent all properties within the county that are currently zoned agricultural. So currently, chickens are not permitted in any of the residential zone categories. I think as we've heard this evening, that includes both the non-urban, so rural residential, suburban residential, and residential hamlets and villages, as well as the urban residential zone categories. So the illustrative map there shows properties highlighted in yellow. Those are properties that are zoned residential. Excuse the scale of the map. It's a bit deceiving because the scale and how large it is doesn't necessarily zoom in on some of the settlement areas, but they are represented on the map, I assure you. So these areas also include, as I just mentioned, both rural and urban settlement areas. So Paris, St. George, Burford, as well as Scotland, Oakland, etc. So in preparation of the report, staff did undertake an environmental scan, which revealed that almost every single municipality in the province of Ontario has given some sort of consideration to chickens in residential areas and made some sort of decision on that. They do vary across the board. An attachment of the staff report does try to assist in providing committee with some of the information related to both regulations and outcomes of decisions made related to chickens in residential areas in other municipalities. Some of the pilot projects, in fact, most of them were terminated due to municipalities' concerns related to avian influenza. City of Toronto was one, also the Township of North Dumfries, and the City of Vaughan, and also I believe the City of Mississauga as well. And most of these have been touched on this evening, potential benefits and concerns, and they're also more detailed in staff's report, albeit to say that biosecurity measures would need to be considered should chickens be permitted in residential areas, if that's the decision that is made. Good consideration should be given to biosecurity measures such as those that you've heard of tonight. So property upkeep, enclosures for chickens, coops and runs, keeping those clean, enclosure of food, removal of scraps, handling of manure, etc. These are all items that do require further consideration should chickens be permitted in residential areas. Staff would be more than happy to bring forward another report to provide some further information on different regulations or different mitigation measures as well to help committee make that decision should committee choose options 2, 3, or 4. So those options would suggest that regulations would follow. That is something that was outlined in staff's report. However, the report does not conclude that those should be the options that are chosen. There are 4 options for consideration. So this slide here just attempts to demonstrate exactly the size of coop that would be required per number of chickens, starting at 2, noting that they are a social animal and they don't do well with only having 1 chicken. So the coop size actually aligns much with the delegate. I think it was the first delegation, which mentioned that the lesser coop size or minimum standard coop size would be somewhere around the 8 square feet, and then you would need a run size of an additional 4x4. So that would be a total of 24 square feet for 2 chickens. So that would be about the minimum coop size, and then it would go up from there, noting that each chicken does require a minimum size to exercise, to lay eggs, and to live healthy. You don't want to put chickens in too close a proximity, of course. You don't want them living on top of one another. Again, it goes back to biosecurity measures for spread of disease and ensuring cleanliness and room to move. So again, this demonstration or illustration just tries to demonstrate consideration of setbacks for coops and enclosures from both the property lines of the yard where the coop would be located and also any neighboring dwellings on separate lots. Again, this report does not outline specific setbacks or regulations for consideration this evening. This illustration just provides that further consideration should be given to specific regulations should options 2, 3, or 4 be considered. In addition, we did hear from the development community on this matter before presenting to committee in preparation of the report, and that had much to do with restrictive covenants. So new developments within the County of Brant, mainly within Southwest Paris and North Paris, do have restrictive covenants, some of which do prohibit livestock. There could also be older properties in all throughout the county as well, in every single area, whether it be residential or another zone category that carries a restrictive covenant that would also prohibit livestock. It would be prudent on the property owner to check title of the property to determine whether or not there is a restrictive covenant on title, should committee choose to permit chickens in residential areas. So that would be an ownership issue. You need to check title to ensure that a restrictive covenant is not registered on the property to prohibit the raising and keeping of chickens. So again, just to quickly outline, so there are 4 options that are outlined in staff's report. So the first would be to maintain current provisions. That would be to only allow chickens in agricultural areas of the county on properties zoned agricultural, subject to regulations in the bylaw, as well as provincial minimum distance setback requirements and building permits where applicable. Option number 2 could be to permit chickens in non-urban zones. So these would be the suburban residential zone, rural residential zone, as well as the residential hamlets and villages zone, subject to regulations that could be specified at a later date. And then option 3 would be to permit chickens in all residential zones. So this would include both urban and non-urban residential zones. So in areas such as Paris, St. George, subject again to specific regulations that could be specified at a later date. And option number 4 would be to temporarily approve chickens in specified residential areas for a temporary time period, subject to a pilot project. So again, just using these same visuals. So option 1 would continue to only permit chicken within the yellow areas of the map. So again, only on lots that carry an agricultural zone, subject to regulations and provincial minimum distance setbacks, as well as building permits where applicable. And this option, it's worthy to say, would not require any changes to existing bylaws. It wouldn't require any changes to existing policies or procedures. Everything would remain status quo as far as enforcement or permitted uses on properties in the County of Brant. Option number 2 would be to permit chickens within non-urban residential zone categories. So again, rural residential, residential hamlets and villages, and suburban residential. So option 2 would permit chickens in the brown shaded areas on the map. Again, I apologize for the scale, it's rather large, but it does attempt to provide a visual of where these areas are actually located throughout the county. It would also continue to allow chickens, of course, in the agricultural areas on lots zoned agricultural. And again, this option would most likely require specific regulations to be approved at a later date, should committee opt for option 2. Option 3 would be to permit chickens in all residential zones. So this would include the zones that I just mentioned in the non-urban residential zone categories, as well as all urban residential zone categories. And again, using this visual, it would be all areas shaded in yellow, subject to regulations that could be specified at a later date. And again, still maintaining provisions for livestock in the agricultural areas on lots zoned agricultural. So again, option 4 would initiate a pilot project, so temporarily permit chickens in residential areas for a specified period of time, subject to specific regulations, possible registration, possible property inspections, and possible fees to examine potential impacts of chickens in residential areas. So this option does allow for data collection, monitoring of the project uptake, and evaluation of staff resources, but would need careful consideration as to what happens should the project end and regulations not become permanent. So once temporary provisions expire, if provisions are not made permanent, removing chickens could be potentially difficult, could be difficult for biosecurity reasons. So relocation of chickens to other properties could become difficult due to quarantining and risk of spread of illness or disease to other flocks. Also the enforcement issues, so following up to ensure that chickens have in fact been removed, not replaced, and social issues as well. So attachment to animals once animals come into a family's lives or a household's life. So following direction from committee this evening, county staff could prepare a committee council report, draft regulations, registration program outline, and amendments to municipal bylaws to reflect committee's preferred option. Should it be option 2, 3, or 4 for clarity? Option 1, again, does not require any amendments to any bylaws or policies at this time. Future regulatory changes are suggested to be communicated to residents through a comprehensive communication strategy following committee direction. Staff would be happy to work with the communications team to roll that out, possibly in the spring or once the committee decision has been made and we move forward with regulations in future. So with that, I will conclude. Sorry, I did take up some time there, but thank you for your patience, and I'll open it up for questions.
Committee members, this is the opportunity again to ask questions on the report. It's important that we understand the report before we start deliberating on a particular option. So that time will come, but right now it's important to understand the report. So are there any questions to Jessica with respect to the report itself? Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Jessica. Thorough report. Thank you for all the work you've put into it. My questions are specific to the pilot option. From what we're hearing, to do chickens well requires a commitment. It requires investment. It requires setting up properly, and in a pilot scenario, would it be a would it be a specific sample size, like a test number of properties that are allowed to embark in this journey, or would it be, if you could just kind of illustrate that for me to visualize a little bit better, start there.
Absolutely. Through the chair to Councillor House. So to answer your question, a pilot project could definitely be a select sample size. That has been done by other municipalities. There has been, I believe it's been broken up by ward, and I think that was done, in Brampton or Mississauga. I can't recall off the top of my head specifically which one, but I do believe one of them took that approach to only permit chickens within specific wards. And I do believe it was almost on a lottery basis where a number was selected of properties that would be eligible. And once you applied, then that absorbed one of the numbers. And so it was a limited amount of properties within specific wards. And then there were still regulations that were developed specific for the pilot project to regulate chickens within those wards on the properties that received a lottery number.
Follow up, Mr. Chair, if that's okay. Thanks, Jessica. And I guess the follow up is related to the policing of it, and it seems to me that there's the potential that this would require a fair amount of scrutiny, making sure that setbacks are being observed, and at the same time, I'm cognizant of the fact that we already have backyard chickens, probably in every ward, and they all fly under the radar, or mostly fly under the radar. But I'm curious about the amount of effort required by bylaw to police this, even in a pilot format. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Through the chair to Councillor House. So Greg Bergeron is here this evening, manager of bylaw enforcement services. So I might invite Greg up to help me out with that question.
Through the chair to Councillor House. From what we've read and in speaking to my counterparts in other municipalities, it does vary, but usually it's at the onset of the licensing regime where you're going to catch those setbacks and make sure that the runs and the coops are compliant. It's very similar to a pool enclosure. It's like on this date, this time, the pool enclosure was compliant. Following that, I mean, we have the ability to do annual inspections if we want. A lot of municipalities have taken the approach, they do a one-time inspection on this date, this time, it was compliant with the regulations, and then they default to, any complaints for future reference. The impact on us, the bylaw division, it's an unknown quantity at this time, but again, in speaking to my counterparts, I can say like the city of Brantford has 48 registrations, and since August of last year. The city of Waterloo has 50 registrations, and it seems that they are requiring residents to obtain permits every year. And I think Georgina, which has a similar population to the county of Brant, I think they're sitting at about 45,000. I think they have about 27 registrations. So I think at the onset, we may get, a fair amount of registrations if we, if committee does decide to take any of those routes. But I think it's gonna taper off, and there are some regulations that are going to be introduced, and people will have to follow those regulations.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Councillor Kyle?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to either Jessica or Greg, whoever feels they can answer the question. But so we know the chickens are already here. And the options, there's 4 options that are laid out in the report, and the option 1 that suggests, we keep things status quo. One of the things we talked about in our previous discussions on this was a plan to address the chickens that are currently not compliant because they're not allowed. So that was not mentioned in the report anywhere. So just wondering if there was any discussions at the staff level about how, if we were to go with the current bylaw, how we address those chickens that are already there.
Through the chair, Councillor Kyle. Our enforcement approach generally is that we are complaint based, unless there's an element of safety, or it's a repeat offender. Subject to committee and council's direction, we can certainly change that protocol if we want to take a more robust approach to eliminating chickens that are not permitted in zones. But at this point, we rely on complaints. We do have some parameters, and we, as I've mentioned before, we respect property rights, and we have to ensure that when we go on a property, it's for reasonable and probable grounds. So we want to make sure that we follow that and respect property owners' rights.
Any further questions? Again, questions of clarification. I've got Councillor Miller, and then I think Councillor McAlpine. Okay, first Councillor Miller.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Jessica. Jessica, 2 questions. First one, there's some municipalities that did the pilot project, Toronto being one of them. I thought they give it a robust effort. They started in 2018. I didn't read in the report why they stopped. It was brought up tonight. They seen rising cases of AI. Do you know if there were any other concerns that they stopped doing it, other than the rising cases of AI?
Through the chair to Councillor Miller, I believe that was the predominant concern that I read about. I didn't read in detail about any other concerns that were aired, but I do believe that it had mainly to do with the spread of AI cases.
Okay. I'm just thinking if we do it, best to learn how other municipalities have done it and learn from their mistakes. Second question, again, didn't see it in the report. Have you reached out to any commercial operators?
Through the chair to Councillor Miller, no, we have not reached out to any commercial operators. Just we only reached out to Chicken Farmers Ontario as part of this report.
Okay, thank you.
Now, I think Councillor McAlpine was just indicating to me that Councillor Oakley has a question, or did you have a question, Councillor McAlpine? Okay, then I'll go to Councillor Oakley.
Thank you. Through the chair to staff, since we highlighted when Greg was speaking there that safety is an issue and how much biosecurity has come up both from the delegations and in the report, I would think that that would trigger our necessity to be more actively enforcing. So would that then be, with that in mind, I would encourage that to be part of the conversation with option one.
Excuse me, Councillor
well,
Oakley. Councillor Oakley, if you may not have understood, these are just questions of clarification to the report. We will get into the discussion on the various options after we understand the report. So if you have questions with regard to the report, this is the opportunity to ask them.
My apologies. Just to the preamble, would staff conclude, given the biosecurity concerns, that that this should be more thoroughly enforced, regardless of the option we go through with non-compliant users?
Through the chair to Councillor Oakley. That's a difficult question for me to answer. I'm by no means an expert in biosecurity. It's something that I would defer probably to our legal department or somebody who has more knowledge in that field. It's certainly an answer that we can come back with at some point to committee and council. But at this point, I think it's premature for me to answer that question without all of the information.
Are there any other questions? Councillor McAlpine.
My question's kind of along the same line. Dealing with avian flu, I understand most of the spread is through wild flocks and wild birds. How many cases are actually recorded from avian flu being sent from a residential to a commercial flock? Is there any actual cases that are out there, or a number of cases?
Through the chair to Councillor McAlpine. So as part of this report, there weren't cases specifically included, number of cases for that statistic. Staff could definitely look into that and provide it in a follow-up report or provide it to committee for clarification.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. So my question here, and it was alluded to a couple times, depending on which option of the report that we choose about, potential size of yards and stuff like that. My question is, should we not understand that prior to making a decision as to which way we go?
Do you wish to answer that? That may be a difficult question to answer.
Well, sorry, Mr. Chair. I'm curious. Like, with the discussions the staff had when they were producing this report, and Jessica alluded to the fact of, hypothetically, if we choose option 3, we can, decisions will have to be made afterwards as to potential size of yards and that sort of thing. Or option 4, decisions will have to be made after. As to, if it's a lottery, which she kind of spoke to, and then what size of yards. I'm curious, what was the discussion staff-wise? Was there any discussion as to what they feel the size of potential yards or a pilot project would be?
Through the chair to Councillor Pierce. There has been some discussions surrounding that, and I think one of the common factors that we see in other municipalities is that they're generally not permitted in multi-dwelling scenarios. So I think the thought was that we would, put more meat onto the table once we have direction from the committee as to what the setbacks are going to be. But generally, I think there's going to be some regular setbacks where we feel that it's proper and it meets all of the biosecurity needs. It deals with noise and some of the nuisance issues around chickens in residential zones. That was our thought. Without coming with full regulations for the committee at this point, we're just waiting for direction.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Councillor Garneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Greg. I'm wondering if you could describe for us, please, what happens now when someone makes a complaint that there are chickens where they aren't supposed to be, both in terms of the process, what are the potential outcomes, and how much impact do we have over what happens next there, please?
Through the chair to Councillor Garneau. So basically the process is we receive a complaint from the general public. The information is generally protected under Municipal Freedom of Information Act. So we check the zoning on the property, determine if it's agricultural. If it's not agricultural, we follow up with an inspection. The officer will attend, try and have a conversation with one of the owners, and explain what the bylaw is. Compliance. We try and work with our residents as much as humanly possible. Barring that, if they're not able to or not willing to remove the chickens in a certain allotted time, we follow up with a zoning order, which gives them a definitive date to comply with the bylaw. Failing that, if they don't comply, we are in a position where we can lay provincial charges under the Planning Act, which carries some pretty significant fines. So that would be a Part 3 summons. We would have to summons that individual to court and answer to the charge, which can be a lengthy process at times, but that's basically the process. And depending on how it goes in court, it could go to a trial. There could be some agreements that are made for compliance prior to trial. And there's also, if the person is convicted, they can be, subject to fines and also penalty orders from the Justice of the Peace, requiring them to remove. It would be a restraining order or prohibition order.
Any other questions? Did you have a follow-up?
If I may,
Yep.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Just wondering, Greg, how often this happens that we take it to that step. Do in your experience, most folks find a voluntary resolution, or how does this usually unfold?
Through the chair to Councillor Garneau, it usually unfolds with compliance. Oftentimes, I suppose it can be a cat and mouse game where people will get rid of the chickens, when we do an inspection, and then a couple months later we get a call again. But generally speaking, the compliance rate is very high. I think in the 8 or 9 years that I've been here, I think we've laid one charge on an individual who refused to get rid of them, and I think it was ducks actually. And I think that kind of made its way into the court process, but I think he complied in the end.
Any final questions, Councillor Kyle?
Thanks, Mr. Chair, through you. Greg, that kind of triggered a question for me. So if you get to the point in the process where you're going to take it to court, the person who made the complaint, do they have to then provide their name publicly? And at that point, if they withdraw their complaint, what happens?
Through the chair to Councillor Kyle, generally we don't rely on that witness. The officer is sent to that property and they make their own observations. And at that point, the officer becomes the primary witness. So we don't rely on those residents. We don't want to put them in a situation where they have to testify against their neighbor. I suppose if a justice of the peace and there's some dialogue in court where they want to identify that person, it would be up to the justice of the peace to make that decision whether they can compel that person to come forward.
If there are no further questions for the committee, I have a question, and through to the planner. If I understand it correctly, if the committee decides to pursue option 2, 3, or 4, that doesn't necessarily mean that backyard chickens are approved. What it does mean is further investigation in terms of regulatory approaches, bylaw changes, etc., would have to occur and be brought back, essentially initiating that type of process. Am I correct in that?
Through you. Yes, you are correct. That is the correct understanding. There is no amended bylaw on for this evening to be approved. There would definitely be more work that staff would need to bring forward.
And just following with that, if an option 2, 3, or 4 was chosen, a bylaw amendment would have to be made and a public process would have to be gone through before the changes are made in terms of a bylaw amendment.
That is correct.
Would that bylaw amendment be appealable?
Yes, and it would be to amend both the zoning bylaw and the animal control bylaw, and to perhaps even and to establish, not perhaps, to establish a separate bylaw for regulating chickens, or to put those regulations and build them into the animal control bylaw. But the zoning bylaw amendment would be appealable.
Okay, that concludes the questions of clarifications. Let's do the easy thing first. Would someone move that report be received? Councillor Coleman, seconded by Councillor Bell. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. We've received the report. Now, how do you wish to deal with the issue? Mayor Bailey.
I'd like to put option 3 on the table, seeking a seconder for discussion, and then I'd like to speak to it.
Option 3 is moved by Mayor Bailey and it's seconded by Councillor Kyle. Can I just have someone read option 3 so we're clear what it is?
Through Chair Chambers to committee, option 3 is permit chickens within all residential areas and zones subject to specific regulation.
And you wish to speak to it, Mayor Bailey?
Yes, thank you, through the chair. I just want to say that the mayor is a little bit different than a councillor because the whole county is my playground, so to speak. And there's a lot of people in the county of Brant that have moved here to have a lifestyle or a certain way of living, I guess. You move from Brantford or move from somewhere else, Hamilton, and they invest in the county of Brant and they buy their little 2.5 acre property either in Harrisburg or Harley or somewhere in between, and they move from Brantford where they can have chickens on Clarence Street or the beautiful Avenue of Dufferin, or they can have chickens almost anywhere else. And I've watched things go wrong and things go right at every level in the county. I've seen people, first of all, with all the chickens that we have in the county of Brant, we have to either say there's no chickens or there is chickens. And people that are non-compliant, I think it's going to take a bylaw a lot more time to ask those people to get rid of their chickens when they really haven't disturbed anyone. And he says there's only been one complaint in 9 years. So I'm suggesting that you would either want chickens or you wouldn't want chickens. I don't want chickens. I bet you my neighbor doesn't want chickens. But if you live on a side road, on White Swan Road or somewhere else, and you want chickens, you should be able to have chickens. Because the minute you're not responsible, or you get bored of the chickens, or the chickens are dying and you don't like it, or you have a husky and the husky eats the chickens, and it's traumatic for the kids that thought it was going to be wonderful to gather them in a basket and eat them for breakfast. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong with good intentions. And I think that we've put too many restrictions on the county of Brant's citizens. We've locked them down with COVID. We've put in restrictions everywhere. It's time to let people make their own decisions, be responsible, either treat the chickens with respect and it will work. If you get bored of the chickens and they die, you won't do it again. But we can't keep putting restrictions on people when they've made the choice to move to the county of Brant from somewhere else. When you say they can have chickens in Brantford and then they buy 3 acres in Burford and they can't have a chicken, it's ridiculous. That's it.
Any other comments with regard to the motion option 3? Councillor Kyle first and then Councillor Oakley.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to committee, I guess the approach I take is a little bit different. I'm supportive of option 3 as well. And the premise for that is that the chickens are already here. And I come at it from an agricultural perspective and an agricultural background, and I have spoken with some of the commercial flock folks in and around the county. And like my initial first reaction, theirs was no. But then when you tell them we have a bylaw that is not proactively enforced for lots of good reasons that Greg has laid out, then their tune changes as well. And I think for the actual protection of the biosecurity, well, the bylaw was made with intentions to protect the biosecurity of our farms. It's not doing that when the chickens are here anyways. So I think putting some parameters around the chickens and some rules, I think would go a long way to help satisfy the concerns of our chicken, turkey, egg producers in the county and surrounding counties, because that's something to consider as well. We're not far from Oxford, we're not far from Norfolk, and what happens here, there's a radius when there's something like avian influenza. And I think Councillor McAlpine rightly pointed out that a lot of the spread is by wild birds, so things like making sure there's closed enclosures and that type of thing, again, goes a long way to protecting the biosecurity. So I'm in favor of option 3, simply because they're already here. So unless we have a plan to actually address the chickens that are here already in some sort of proactive way, I think we're further ahead to put some rules around it and let folks have their chickens.
Councillor Oakley.
Thank you, through the chair. I'd also like to speak in favor of option 3. I think we've talked a lot about biosecurity here. In my opinion, option 1 doesn't have an additional any additional teeth as we initially requested to address the biosecurity, and in my mind, having the option for people to have the chickens legally will allow us both revenue from the licensing fees to pay for any enforcement that we might need of that program or of non-compliant owners. It will give an option for currently non-compliant owners to go somewhere other than just you have to get rid of your chickens and potential court battles or potential hiding the chickens. It gives you an option out there. And it gives us a way of communicating with CFO in their communication. They have a way that we can communicate to our license holders any sort of avian flu issues and what to do in those circumstances. And if we also followed up with a strong educational program, I'm sure we will also have a lot more compliance than we currently do have with our chicken populations that are there.
Councillor Bell, and then Councillor Miller, then Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not support option 3. There are a number of reasons why. We've heard already tonight of a number of pilot projects in locations similar to ours. Indeed, one of them is our neighbouring community of North Dumfries, and those pilots resulted in chickens not being permitted in backyards. I'm troubled as well by the level of demand here. The petition that was presented to us, when you look at it a little more closely, there are people from Guelph, Mississauga, Orangeville, St. Catharines. I'm not hearing the voice necessarily of the people of the county. So if I discount them, there are probably 70 people from the county that have signed that petition. That's 0.02% of our community. And to take Patrick Draper's commentary, which I think was well said, and I think it provided balance to the argument, there are a lot of people that perhaps don't even know, will be surprised when they find out if we were to approve this. And I think the public consultation needs to go an awful lot further than the 70 people that say, I'd like chickens. 5 of our neighbouring communities do not permit backyard chickens. And I am concerned about the willingness and the ability of people to actually follow the controls that Brandon quite correctly pointed out to us. Driving in our county is well regulated, but our biggest residential concern is speeding. And people are tested, they are licensed, they are educated, signage is everywhere, and yet people don't adhere to speeding limits. So I do not have necessarily the confidence that despite all the education, all the licensing, all the permitting that we could have, that people will follow it. And I do worry that we will end up in the place that Councillor Howes mentioned, where we will have issues with rats and other predators. So I will not support this. I would, if this one fails, I do have a motion to bring forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't support option 3. I support the status quo. And I will admit there's good arguments for option 3. The report was a little lean on the biosecurity risks to commercial operations. And I've asked it before. I've never gotten, you can find information for and against, but I did do as much research as I can, and I thought I had a very good source. And I'm just going to read it. It says the risk of backyard chickens increasing the spread of avian influenza to large farm poultry operations is a concern. It's a concern. If it's a concern to them, it should be a concern to us. And to the mayor's point, it's not about lifestyle, it's about being responsible. And if we look at other municipalities, as Councillor Bell has said, who have gone down this road, they said, oh my goodness, look at the rise in the cases of avian influenza. And they stopped, mostly for that reason. And I believe we would see the same thing. I don't think you have to hit your head against a brick wall to know that it's going to hurt. So why would we go down that road? Like I say, other municipalities. So, like I say, I will support not option 3, but I'll support the current status quo. And just one more thing I want to point out is in the report it talks about biosecurity and public health mitigation measures. And there's a bit of a list there. It talks about isolating new birds, daily maintenance and cleaning of enclosures and properties, animal and veterinary care. Mandatory veterinary care should be required for chickens in residential areas. Mandatory veterinary care. And it talks about a municipal registration program. I suspect if this was a legal thing, very, very few owners would actually follow those biosecurity measures. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was originally intending to propose option 4, thinking that we had more to learn before we totally gave a green light to this. However, through all the discussions tonight, I recognize and appreciate that it would be difficult to allow people to start into a backyard chicken operation not knowing if they were going to be allowed to continue. That's a challenging situation. So the other thing is I see all the potential pitfalls. I shared a lot of those concerns until recently. I went and visited a backyard chicken operation and saw how it was done well. That did a lot to change my mind. And so I will support option 3 with the understanding and the confidence that our staff will take a very conservative approach and wrap sufficient regulations around this to mitigate all of the potential concerns. So with that, I'll end up supporting option 3.
Councillor Garneau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'd like to speak in favor of option 3. I'm in agreement with others around the table that we need enforceable criteria because the birds are already here. Why option 3 versus, say, option 2, which would get a lot of the folks I hear from who want chickens involved, is because the look and feel of properties as older communities have evolved is there's big lots and little lots regardless of where you are in the zone, and I feel confident that with the discussion already, staff will be able to put it through parameters that will even that playing field. I think one of the pieces I'm reflecting on in this, and it speaks to the piece about veterinary care, is that many of the folks who want chickens in a backyard context will view them as pets and companion animals with whom they build a relationship, different than someone who farms stock for market. And I think it's difficult for some folks to realize that a bird that you could buy for not a lot of money from the PV Mart might be something that you disproportionately then spend on its housing and its veterinary care. And it's a very different relationship with the animals. So with that in mind, I feel confident we can get this right. Just as there's protections in our communities already for other companion animals that aren't being cared for, there are those mechanisms. But right now, it's very difficult when a complaint comes forward to really move to that full compliance status, but also we don't know where the birds are. So when it comes to a biosecurity incident, we know they're here, but we don't really know where they are. And I live in a portion of the county that is still zoned agricultural, and there are many farm properties around us, but there are also many folks who might be more accurately described as rural residential who are zoned agricultural and have chickens. And quite honestly, they're running up and down my road on a day-to-day basis. Not only does that create a safety issue for drivers and the birds themselves, but I think we need a program that can get everybody on board for the protection of the community. And as I say, it is those loose birds in the countryside that are perhaps putting our commercial producers further at risk. So happy to support the recommendation of the mayor. Thank you.
Just a reminder, option number 3 is moved and seconded. Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I cannot support option 3 at this time. It's not the fact that I'm against having the chickens, but I feel that an option 3 is putting us in a situation where we're giving the green light, and then all of a sudden, hypothetically, if we go down the road and things don't work out, then we got to put the red light up and draw it back. A few things have been said around here, and I think everybody's in agreement. Yes, chickens are already here. I think we all understand that. We all know that. Councillor Garneau made the statement of enforceable criteria. 100% agree with that. And I don't, and as I was saying earlier in regards to the report, a lot of the criteria, in my mind, isn't there in any of these decisions because it's decisions that we have to make after the fact. It comes down to the point where, and it was said earlier as well, people look at them as potentially pets sometimes. There's good pet owners and bad pet owners. I feel that by giving option 3, it may in fact bring out more bad pet owners, which we don't want to have happen. There will be another option if this one fails, but I cannot support option 3 in the sense of giving the green light right away. When we've had other jurisdictions around us do the pilot projects and it didn't work out. I don't think it's prudent for us to give the green light right away. But again, I'm not opposed to having them, just not full-fledged. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak to the resolution, which is recommending option 3? Councillor McAlpine.
So growing up in a rural residential area, I actually kept chickens as a kid, and we had about 60, so it's a lot larger than this. They were meat hens in that sense. And there was a lot of positive things reinforced, looking after them. I had to feed them, water them, clean out, all that kind of stuff. And so I think there is a lot of positive reasons for it. I know that we tried keeping them over winter one year, and that was a challenge, to say the least. So I don't see it as a, what would you call it, a financially successful project, but it is something that could be a learning experience for a number of people. But I would prefer option 4 if this number 3 fails, because I do think that we do need to look at it a little closer, and I do think that at some point we need to figure out a way to regulate it. But I think by doing option 4, we would be able to secure more public input and more concerns that this might be just flying under the radar at this point. And that would be my preference at this point.
Anyone else? Again, I'll go to the second time speakers, and Mayor Bailey is the mover of the motion, so he will be the last one to speak. I just wanted to make a couple comments on myself. I may be the only member of council that has chickens. And I've had them for many years, and I'm perfectly legal because I'm in the agricultural area. I have a commercial chicken farmer half a mile away from me. I probably represent more of a risk to avian flu than anyone in the town of Paris that has backyard chickens. And again, I'm perfectly legal. My chickens, I've had them, a lot of people don't know this, but chickens don't lay eggs forever. They live about 8 or 10 years, and they only lay eggs half of that time. So if you have backyard chickens, half the time, if you have them till they live and die, you're not going to have any eggs. You're just going to have chickens. my concern is this, and it's I've been around the planning committee quite a while, and I've seen many, many times where you have conflicts between neighbors on various incompatible land uses. In my mind, chickens are an agricultural use, not a residential use. There are a lot of people that live in residences that do not want chickens next door. If someone is enjoying their patio or their swimming pool, the last thing they want to have is chickens 20 feet away. So I'm not in favor of backyard chickens. I never have been. I like chickens. I have them. As Councillor McAlpine says, or someone else said, that if you think you're going to make money selling eggs, you're not. It's an investment and it's going to cost you money, but a lot of people want to have chickens, and I understand that. So I'm not going to support option 3. I'm not going to support option 2. I'm not going to support option 4. I will support status quo option 1, agricultural uses in agricultural areas, residential uses in residential areas. So I'm prepared to call the question after Mayor Bailey has the last say.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to speak to Councillor McAlpine. With option 3, we will have that community involvement that you were speaking of that might make you more comfortable. And obviously, supporting status quo is not what the people want. We're here. And to do a pilot test after talking about chickens for 20 years seems a little redundant. So with the pilot period being taken off the table, and Councillor McAlpine's concerned about people not getting a chance to give their opinions, I think you should feel better, a little bit better about option 3, the way I see it anyway. And I would rather see 3 chickens in my neighbor's yard than a boom box and people getting ready to rob me or whatever they're going to do. And so I don't understand why number 3 is not very obvious to a rural community like Brant County, when people have chosen that lifestyle. I mean, it's not going to be suitable for everyone, but I don't think everyone's going to apply. And to use a comparable to, like Mississauga or Toronto is ridiculous. We should be using comparables like Norfolk and other places like that are more suited to us. I'm not sure what happened in North Dumfries, but something happened there. I'm not sure why they don't have chickens, but they should. And I'll talk to Susan about it, Mary Foxton. So that's all I have to say is that the concerns that have been brought up against option 3, I think you could be comfortable supporting 3, knowing that your concerns are going to be taken care of with the process and the bylaw protocol.
It's my understanding that a member of council has requested a recorded vote. So I'm going to ask the clerk to, I see Councillor Oakley has his hand up. Did you wish to make further comment, Councillor Oakley? Or were you
yes, just one quick question, Mr. Chair.
Sorry, I didn't hear that, Lucas.
Just one quick comment, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Okay, you'll have the last comment.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I'd also like to make it highlight that staff has previously noted that regardless of what option we go forward, out of 2, 3, or 4, option 1, obviously nothing changes, but out of options 2, 3, or 4, option 3, if we go forward with this particular motion, there will be the opportunity to say no, to have comment and criticism over what biosecurity measures we may or may not find. Insist that there be a public consultation method when the final report comes forward. There will be other opportunities to speak to this. This isn't the final green light.
Okay, with that being said, I believe a member of council has asked the clerk for a recorded vote. I believe that was Councillor Oakley. Do you still wish a recorded vote, Councillor Oakley?
Yes, please.
Then I'll ask the clerk to call the question. The clerk has asked how we proceed. The procedure bylaw asks members of council to stand. We're a little bit awkward here in that Councillors Pierce and Councillor Oakley are online, and if they stand, they might not be recognized. So I'm going to ask the clerk to poll the committee, starting with the chair.
Thank you. Chairman Chambers,
No.
Councillor Kyle,
Yes.
Councillor McAlpine,
Yes, I guess.
Councillor House,
Yes.
Councillor Oakley,
Yes.
Councillor Bell,
No.
Mayor Bailey,
Absolutely.
Councillor Pierce,
No.
Councillor Miller,
No.
Councillor Coleman,
No.
Councillor Garneau,
Yes.
the vote carries 6-5.
Okay, the ayes have it, and that concludes item 10-1. It's my understanding that members of the audience that were here for the chicken issue may wish to leave. Now would be the appropriate time to do that. I'm just going to call about a 3-minute recess to allow the gallery to rearrange. Committee meeting, and recognizing that a couple of members are still outside, but we do have a quorum and we can proceed. And they will join us momentarily. The next item on the agenda is the minutes of previous meetings. The minutes were circulated. Would someone move the minutes? Councillor Pierce, and seconded by Councillor Coleman. Are there any errors or omissions, or questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Minutes are adopted. We have public hearings pursuant to our Brant Telecommunications Tower Protocol, which is a little bit different than a public hearing pursuant to the Planning Act, in that the public hearings with the telecommunication towers are our protocols. We have two items under this part of the agenda, 7.1 and 7.2, and these are public hearings to hear the members of the public and to make a recommendation to council with regard to the telecommunication towers in question. 7.1 is the telecommunications tower located on 9 Main Street in St. George. I understand that there are people that wish to speak during the public hearing, and some have registered with the clerk. When it comes time for the public input, I will ask the clerk to go through her register, recognizing that maybe people not on the register. They will also have the opportunity to speak if they wish to, but they will have to wait until the registered people speak. It'll all come out in the wash, and anybody that wishes to speak will have the opportunity to speak. So please do not speak out from the audience. You'll have to come to the podium to make your comments. So I will call the public hearing with regard to the telecommunications tower application on 9 Main Street in St. George to order and ask the planner to introduce the application to the committee.
Thank you and good evening. I am presenting telecommunication tower application CT1-23-HH for 9 Main Street North, St. George. Staff are recommending that the clerks be directed to inform Shared Tower Inc. that the applicant has completed consultation with the County of Brant and the public, and that the telecommunication tower as proposed at 9 Main Street North is not in accordance with the Section 4 Preferred Location Guidelines of the Communication Tower and Communication Antenna Preferred Location Protocol 2020. The subject lands are located north of Beverly Street West, south of Church Avenue, and west of Main Street North. The subject lands have a lot area of approximately 0.29 hectares. Surrounding land uses consist of commercial and low-density residential land uses. The subject lands are designated Core Area and Zone Core Area Commercial C4, which contain the Royal Canadian Legion. The applicant is proposing to establish a 25-meter tall monopole telecommunication structure situated within a locked and electronically monitored mechanical equipment shelter. Fencing will be installed around the base of the tower and will have one locked gated access point. As part of the application, the agent has provided a detailed site selection report and a site plan identifying the proposed tower location and a letter of concurrence request. The site has been reviewed in accordance with the 2020 County of Brant Tower Protocol. The preferred setback is 3 times the tower's height, which is 75 meters, to a minimum of 120 meters away from a residential uses. The nearest adjacent residential dwelling is 50 meters from the proposed tower. No natural heritage features are located within the county's preferred setback distance of 120 meters. No trees or vegetation are proposed to be removed. To conclude, the application has completed the required public consultation and consultation with the County of Brant, and the application is not in keeping with the preferred location guidelines as outlined in Communication Tower Preferred Location Protocol. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Again, there will be questions of clarification. I just have one question to begin. It's my understanding that the committee and the Council of the County of Brant do not have the authority to approve or not approve the application. It's my understanding that the council and the committee are commenting agencies, not approval agencies. Could you explain that?
Through the chair, yes, you're correct. We can't approve or refuse the application.
So the recommendation is a statement according to how the application aligns with the county protocol. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, you're correct.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Hayley. Hayley, I think you said, did I hear you say 120 meters?
Through the chair, yes, 120 meters is our minimum setback.
I thought it was 3 times the height of the tower. Am I mistaken?
Through the chair, yes. It says in our telecom protocol guidelines, it says to a minimum of 120 meters, and I believe that means if the telecom tower doesn't meet the setback limit, it goes to the minimum of 120 meters.
And I've learned something. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Again, clarification to the planner with regard to the proposal. Councillor McAlpine.
So I just want to confirm that the data that we're basing our decision on from the county level was from a 2020 study that we did, our report.
Through the chair, yes, we passed a telecommunications guideline in 2020, I believe.
Okay, so relatively recently, but probably didn't take into consider 5G at that time, or would have it?
Councilor McCalcom, I'm having a very hard time hearing you, and I'm sure everybody else is too. Could you pull your microphone closer and speak louder?
So did it take into consider 5G technology in that report at the time? Do you know?
Through the chair, I'm not sure on that information.
Okay.
Again, questions of clarification before I ask the applicant if they have any comments? I see no questions. Thank you very much. And I will ask if the applicant is available. This is the opportunity for the applicant to come forward and expand on the proposal. And again, if you could identify yourself and the organization.
Thank you, and through the chair, I do have a presentation available just reviewing the application. So thank you all to those who are in attendance this evening. My name is Cheyenne Zierler, and I'm the Senior Planning Manager with Shared Tower. Tonight, I'll be speaking on the application, which is located at 9 Main Street North in St. George. So just as a review, with the advancement of technology and its integration into our day-to-day lives, it is important to recognize that the infrastructure that is needed in order to support these devices, along with growing communities and businesses. As you can see outlined on this slide, wireless technology is responsible for delivering many relied upon communication services, such as voice, data, streaming, web browsing, emergency response services, and something called the Internet of Things, which is what allows our devices to speak to each other. It is also important to note that in order for these services to become available for users, each provider must establish their own wireless network. Now, as population increases and municipalities continue to expand, there are gaps in services and capacity issues that develop along with advancing technology. And the lack of infrastructure limits users' access to that network. Shared Tower takes this opportunity to establish multi-carrier towers that aid in alleviating these gaps in order to provide a continuous level of reliable service. As you can see from the illustration on the bottom, this illustrates how towers work to create a continuous wireless service that is constant and reliable. There are no gaps in service, and everyone is afforded the same level of service despite differences in geographical location. So as a review, telecommunication towers are federally regulated and governed by Health Canada's Safety Code 6 directive. So in terms of the involvement in the process, as mentioned, the county's role is to indicate whether the consultation requirements have been met. And the final approval rests with Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, otherwise known as ISED. So Safety Code 6 specifies the safe limits at which wireless service providers may operate. And these limits have been set at levels approximately 50 times below the point at which any effect on human health is anticipated. In other words, these safety margins have been incorporated into the exposure limits to ensure that even worst case scenario exposures remain far below the threshold for harm. So to clarify, this proposal is for the tower itself. The equipment that is located on the tower by the providers has to go through its own process with ISED in order to prove that it falls within the Safety Code 6 limits and be granted a license before locating any equipment on the tower. During this process, the safety reports that are conducted are often much lower than the Safety Code 6 limits at approximately 1 to 5%. To again highlight how integrated wireless technology is in our society, and as well as how safe and regulated it is, Here is a list of familiar places where there are currently equipment either on site, on the rooftops, or in the building itself with antennas located throughout the building. You'll notice many of these are hospitals, including children's hospitals, and they all must abide by the Safety Code 6 regulations. Now, there are both natural and human-made sources of electromagnetic energy. As you will see here on the slide, some of the natural sources include the Earth's natural magnetic field, visible light, and lightning. On the right, you'll notice some of the human-made sources, which include common day-to-day items like a microwave, wireless devices like cell phones, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, as well as commercial broadcasting via AM/FM radio and television. So the amount of and duration of radio frequency exposure will not change for 3G, 4G, 5G. 5G is just the underlying software that defines the latest wireless protocol. The 5G code resides on all of our 5G devices, and the network equipment located on the tower instructs each of these devices how and when to communicate. Just like how our laptops run on different operating systems like Windows 11. So here you'll notice some everyday items that fall within the same frequency spectrum in blue, which is non-ionizing. These same frequencies have been around for many years, just being used for different application. For example, much of the cellular frequencies are decommissioned broadcast television frequencies. When ISED has a spectrum auction, it's basically reusing spectrum that was previously used for a different application, like broadcast TV, and reusing it for an application like cellular. The vehicle or medium to deliver data has not changed, just the application. So with a new application, these frequencies do not all of a sudden become dangerous. They have been around for many years, they're regulated, and they're just being used for a different application. Now back to the tower proposal. So the first step in looking for the best location to provide the coverage requirements involves investigating options within the search ring. For this proposed tower, the purpose is to build the infrastructure required for carriers to provide faster services like 5G. Now, 5G does not travel as far as 3G or 4G, which is why the tower is located closer to the user. Throughout the search, there were options investigated that were not able to be pursued due to a number of reasons, including unwilling landlords, development plans, and elevation issues for a 25-meter telecommunication tower, which resulted in its current proposed location being submitted as the best possible option to reach those coverage objectives. So in accordance with the County of Brant's protocol, consultation was completed with a public information package sent out to residents within a 500-meter notification radius, which was 630 residents. Signage posted on site on Main Street North, and a public information session which was held on July 24th from 6 to 8 p.m., to which there were 6 members of the public that attended. There were residents that emailed in from the mailed notice, and their concerns regarding the proposal were addressed through the information that I'm providing you here tonight. So to conclude, I've also included a rendering of the proposal on site. Although it does not meet the preferred setback of 3 times tower heights, being 75 meters, it is sufficiently set back at 50 meters, which is as far back as we could go on the property to adhere to this preference. However, it is in accordance with the county's preferences for towers that are needing to be within 120 meters of residential, as it is a shorter tower, being 25 meters in height, and also it is a discrete monopole design, which is very common in urban areas, which, as you can see here, also features flush-mounted equipment. That concludes my presentation through you, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Committee members, this is the opportunity for questions of clarification to the presenter. I have one to begin, and then I'll go to Councillor Miller. If someone has a question that a member of the committee can answer or staff can. Do you have a contact where they can contact to have their questions answered?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm also able to provide them with contact information to ISED or Health Canada, where those questions can be answered if they are in regards to those regulations.
So if questions are referred to you, you will endeavor to answer them. Councilor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the presenter. Do you know at this point in time how many ISPs or other companies wish to use this tower?
Through you, Mr. Chair, as of right now, typically when we submit applications, we are required to have an anchor tenant. As of right now, there's one confirmed carrier, and we're speaking with the others as well.
Okay, as one of the others, you're speaking with the county? You know, the county branch?
Through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of being a service provider?
Or in terms of using the tower?
Not currently, but we often work with municipalities to host some of the municipal equipment on there as well.
Okay, yeah, because we've done that with many towers. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions to the applicant? Councilor McAlpine, and then Councilor Kyle.
The reasoning for having it right in the village, is there a reason for that versus, say, on the outskirts of the village or some other location?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, in terms of the location of the sites, as I mentioned, 5G doesn't carry as far as 3G, 4G. Typically, you see it in a coverage range of 500 meters, 700 meters, depending on the topography that's surrounding the tower. So locating it within a certain search ring, and when, I'm actually going to go back to the map here, when the carriers are looking for specific coverage, we also take into account the existing infrastructure as well. So there is a tower to the east, over a kilometer away, as well as to the north. So locating on that tower wouldn't reach the coverage objectives of providing 5G. And in terms of its location, the search that was conducted in terms of the best suitable spots that wasn't perhaps right in the middle of a residential neighborhood being located on a commercial property, those are some of the factors that we take into account.
Any final questions? Then I'll ask you to just stand down, and you'll have the opportunity to return after hearing from the members of the public. Okay, this is the opportunity for members of the public to make comment with regard to this application. I have three people that have registered to speak. I'm going to go through them one by one, and then I'll open it up to anyone else that wishes to make comment. I will also state on the committee addendum there was a petition, and that is deemed to be received. And that petition was from Grace Christie. So let's begin with the comments from members of the public. Grace Christie and Peter Stern. And if you do come forward, just a few rules. Speak loud and clear. Make sure the green button is on so people can hear you. And if you need the podium adjusted, the clerk will assist. And you have 10 minutes to make a presentation or any other comments.
Good evening, Mayor Bailey, councilors, and all present. I would just like to introduce Peter Stern, our spokesperson for the group we've formed in our neighborhood, Protect Our Children. Thank you for your time.
Good evening, everyone, Mayor Bailey and councilors and guests. Thanks for your time to address our concerns regarding the construction of a monopole cell tower in St. George at the Legion Branch 605. First point of attention is the petition that was just mentioned from Protect Our Children group. We have over 700 signatures that do not want or are against the construction of this tower. With that said, going door to door, Christie's done a great portion of that work. and other members in our group have as well. And the bottom line is that, 65 to 70% of the community are against the tower. They don't really care for it. We're also monitoring the area in St. George for frequency radiation levels. Currently, St. George is being mapped as a global EMF network. This is an international group. It's called globalemf.net. It consists of an international group of concerned citizens who give their time to monitor different environments from radio frequency radiation. Volunteers are building biologists, others are doctors, scientists, engineers, teachers, IT technicians, parents, etc., to name a few. The mapping will show where the high levels of radiation are globally and where the low levels are, which are more desirable to live. With that, the levels are around St. George School, German Public School and Children's Center, the daycare, are very low at this point in time. Regarding health risks, we can debate that. Kids are the most vulnerable and are at the highest risk to falling ill to radio frequency radiation. Children have thinner skulls, softer tissue, making it easier for radio frequency radiation to move into the brain easier. Smaller skulls or heads, so less distance for radiation to reach their critical brain region. Because kids are growing, they have a more active stem cell, which can be affected. So, you take a young baby that's developing their lungs or immune system, and they're by baby monitors and such to give off radiation, are going to be more affected to that. So children will have a longer period of exposure from birth to adulthood, leaving them with possible lifelong or permanent health issues. Health Canada only lists 2 side effects. I can list many more, like headaches is the most common, earaches, nausea, sick to your stomach, dizziness, brain fog, memory loss, sleep deprivation, depressions, things like cancer, diabetes, etc. Most of my knowledge is living with EMFs or RFRs for 15 years plus. I've experienced this firsthand, and I know what it does. I know firsthand the detrimental effects it has had on me and my family. I've worked with Dr. Magna Havas from Trent University from Peterborough for 10 plus years, learning and doing our own studies together. Magna has done studies in schools lowering the signal strength of a Wi-Fi to 15% levels and still having enough signal in the school. The difference is all the children with health effects like headaches, nausea, stomach aches, dizziness, etc. all improve or go away. As a parent, it is our duty and responsibility to protect our kids, or to keep our children safe. And everyone knows that children are innocent. It's our duty to protect them. To allow the cell tower to be built would be a failure to our children and ourselves. No one has the right to bring harm to anyone, including our children. We feel that the community has received invalid information. Yes, Health Canada says it's safe. Canada levels 3 times to 5 times higher than some countries. The threshold for radiation levels are unacceptable, and here's why. They have no long-term studies, and many of the studies of short-term effects are being challenged. Europe has put a stop to 5G for further studies. Health Canada said asbestos was safe too. We know it's not. So here's my question. Is radio frequency radiation deemed a pollution? Let me read you the definition of a pollutant. Pollution is an introduction of contaminant or contaminants into a natural environment that causes adverse change. Pollution can take the form of any substance or energy. 5G is man-made. It's man-made radiation. Therefore, any studies or safe levels or thresholds given by government, scientists of Health Canada, etc. are false. It is not it is in a natural environment, the levels and thresholds is and should be 0. 5G radiation is a pollutant. It's a downright pollutant. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. This also includes damages to our ecosystem. There's many studies and many researches going on right now with biologists with regards to plant life, birds, fish, etc. My challenge to the County of Brant is to shut off the existing tower down at the top of the hill north of the fire station for 3 to 4 months. Then ask the residents of that area if any of their health has changed. Trust me, they will speak volumes. Magna has proven this with the school studies. For example, we have CP24 News in Toronto reporting the Toronto District School Board at William Lloyd Mackenzie Collegiate Institute in North York had 18 staff members exercise their right to begin a work refusal process for unsafe working conditions for possible radiation exposure from a nearby cell tower. They have filed a complaint with the Ontario Health and Safety Board to have it investigated. Radio frequencies radiation is a real problem, but because you can't see it, touch it, or smell it, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It is a pollution. 5G radiation is man-made. Anything man-made is a pollution. CP24 will not update any information because it's under investigation. Interesting to see the outcome of this situation. The town of Penetanguishene and Muskoka are fighting the same projects for their children, for the towers and the radiation they emit. These are ones that we know of, but I'm sure there's many more. St. George residents are concerned about their property values going down. I think there's a few people in here tonight that have got real concerns. They live right across from where this tower is going to be, and they'd like to start a family, and they don't really want to start it if that tower goes up. It may stop people from moving to St. George, and this could have a negative impact on your economic growth. Something to consider. Concerns to having liability insurance for cell towers. This is a pollutant, so does the St. George Legion Branch 605 have a certificate of liability insurance for land lease agreement? Something to consider. Does Shared Towers Inc. have insurance for their part in the construction of said tower? Does Shared Tower Inc. or the County of Brant have insurance if harm is brought to the residents of St. George? Are there any clauses in place with St. George Legion to have their tower removed if harm is brought to the residents of St. George? What are the lease details? 1 year, 10 years, etc. St. George has an elderly population which may be has an elderly population with many being uninformed, leaving them concerned. This will also change the look of the town by putting that tower up. The St. George Legion Branch 605, to our standing with regards to the Legion's careful decision to accept a contract with Shared Tower Inc. under the full confidential signing of this contract would leave the Legion Branch 605 St. George liable for any harm brought forth in the future to the residents of St. George. So the problems with that are, we ask the County of Brant to write a vote no of concurrence letter to the ISED for these reasons. Meeting with the St. George Legion committee members Wednesday, November 8th, 2023, the committee did not know that Shared Tower Inc. could add 25% to the height of the existing tower at any time.
Peter?
Yeah?
We usually allow 10 minutes for a presentation.
Okay.
I hope you're almost concluding
I am
because you're
getting-
at 10 minutes, and I'm not going to stop you.
Okay,
but,
well, I'll speed up then. Okay. Thank you. So I'll rephrase that. They can add 25% of the height of the existing tower at any time under Section 9, exemption to the communication tower application review. That's once in its lifetime you can add that to the tower. They did not know, St. George Legion did not know that one or more providers could be put equipment on that tower, which has increased the radiation levels for each new provider. Higher radiation will emit will be emitting more, so you're gonna absorb more. There's a discrepancy between what St. George Legion Branch 605 and Shared Tower has agreed upon. The Legion has told us they're getting a 30-meter tower when in actual fact Shared Tower was applied for a 25-meter tower. So it seems that the careful decision made by the committee members of the St. George Legion is not so careful, thus leaving St. George residents vulnerable. So we are asking the County of Brant to void the contract with Shared Tower Inc. and St. George Legion Branch 605 for the lack of transparency. We would like the County of Brant to vote no to our concurrence letter to the ISED for Shared Tower Inc. has not followed the municipality protocol regarding Section 4 Preferred Location Guidelines, subsection 3. And we know that was read earlier. Our ask to the Brant County Council is a new location for the tower be found and preferably a 4G low frequency. We would like to make a motion to open the municipality protocol, the County of Brant, communications tower and communication antenna preferred location. So that's the protocol we'd like to open.
Again, Peter, I'm gonna have to ask you to sum up.
Okay, well, I'm just putting the ask. And for all providers of all 5G equipment be included in the application to answer questions to the community, they are providing the signal. Better transparency, communication, and discussion to the community, including contracts, no secrets. Review Section 9, the exemption communication tower application review. These exemptions give too much freedom to the shared tower or to these providers, because if I want to put an add-on to my house, I got to get a permit. So why do they get an exemption? So I will close with that. Thanks for your time and consideration from the Protection of Our Children group, St. George.
Thanks, Peter, and I apologize for
No,
interrupting, and I understand it's an issue that needs to be vetted, so I didn't mean to rush you.
No, that's okay.
Okay, thank you, and we'll go to the next speaker. And on the list, the next speaker is John Wheat.
John Wheat, 25 West Street, St. George, Ontario. Here to speak to this. Wasn't my duty to do it, but as Mayor Bailey will tell you, I walk a lot in St. George and I talk to a lot of people and ride my bike. I come to find out that there's been a petition circulated for people that are against this tower. So a number of people have said, John, you got some backbone, represent us. Go up there and speak. Another chap came in tonight and said, God, John, I'm glad to see you here. Now I refer to tower speak, and I'll refer to Councillor Coleman a few years ago when I was sitting on this committee. There was problems with communication with our fire service. Station 8 couldn't talk to Station 2. Station 7 had problems talking to Station 1. You will recall that, Councillor Coleman? Then another device was added to one of the towers, and now all our firemen can talk to each other. Last Saturday, I had the good fortune of having a choice, but I knew I'd be well represented at the 7th Cenotaph by our Ward 1 councillors, McAlpine and Kyle. And I went to the Royal Winter Fair because a friend of mine in Iowa, rural Iowa, had written a book about livestock and the people that look after the livestock. And he put it out there that I would have books available. People would come and see me. Well, how do I pay for it? Well, you have two options. Number one, we'll phone Norman. And if you have an American account, you can transfer the money to him. So they talked to him on the phone, and some people transferred the money. How did they do that? The applicant up here had towers that bounced from Tower 1 to Tower 2 to Tower 3, and they got there. If you did not have an American account, use a credit card. So I give them the credit card number. But all that was transferred with cell phones and a building in Toronto. One tower to another tower to a field in remote Iowa. I think back in Ward 1, couple of years ago, Councilor Miller will remember this. There was transmission problems to Harrisburg. Councilor Miller spent countless hours improving that, and now that's been solved. Now I look forward, there's a rumor out there that St. George is going to undergo substantial growth, whether it be residential, commercial, or industrial, who knows? But that's a rumor that St. George is going to grow. I think this is an opportunity because so many people are working from home. Even staff in the county of Brant are working from home. How do they do it? They do it with cell phones and communication towers. That's how business is done today. I'm a dinosaur. I'm not with the current deal. But we're going to grow, and I think this is an opportunity to get a tower in position to substantiate that growth in the St. George area. When I listen to the applicant, they have done, and I have a copy of the application, they have done all of their homework. They have done nothing wrong. They have searched the area to find the best possible location. And this is where they found it. So I would encourage, this council is not going to make the decision to build that tower tomorrow or next week or next month. But I would encourage this council to get behind this project, looking to the future and the future growth that is rumored to be coming to St. George. And that rumor is not just a rumor. You know it's true. It's coming. So let's get ahead of it. Let's get behind this project and think of the future, and let's move forward. Thank you for your time and courtesy, and I will answer any questions. I'll answer questions if you have them.
We don't allow questions to the presenters at this point, John.
Well, that's your decision, Mr. Chair.
We do thank the presenter, though. And I was remiss in not telling Peter, if you do have a copy of the presentation that you made, please submit that or a copy of that so that can be forwarded, and then the points you made are a little bit in writing at that point. Now, next person on the list, Carl Schaff. Did I pronounce that right?
Not for me.
Okay.
My name is Carl. I go by Carl Schaaf. That's okay. 41 Andrew Street in St. George. Yeah. Good evening, Mayor Bailey and Council. So yes, there's this tower proposal. I'm a little concerned about that. The literature that I've had so far myself in the mail speaks of it being a co-location tower, but it doesn't say what's being co-located. Maybe I'm being a bit pedantic here. So clotheslines, hair dryers. I'm assuming it's 5G equipment, and if it is 5G, this assumption, I have a few concerns, a few questions, and so. In particular, the fact that 5G has been proven to be quite impractical in a worldwide sense. I've got some examples coming up. I just want to illustrate them for your interest. And the other one is the health concerns with regard to 5G. Not so much 5G in and of itself, but just the frequency of the signals that the carrier waves, and also the frequency at which the frequency that they are. But I'll get to that in a moment. So red light versus blue light, you can have two streams of light with the same energy, but there's a lot more energy in the blue than in the red, being a higher frequency. There were a few slides I submitted, but I don't know if it's convenient at this time. Three slides? Or am I...
Well, the clerk is assisting. Could I just have an indication of how many people are expecting to speak, just so I can kind of judge time? Thank you. Okay, proceed.
Okay. Well, if you have a printed copy, I'm looking at page 3 with the first slide. It shows the concept of a base station on the left edge, and the idea being the radius that you can cover from a base station at particular frequencies, assuming the same power going out from the transmitter. And the idea being two things. First, as the frequency rises, the radius decreases, of course. Sorry. So on the order of 700 megahertz or lower, there's now a 600 megahertz 4G, I realized recently. So 700 megahertz, you can reach a radius of 20 to 40 kilometers, depending on a few parameters. And as you get up to 6 gigahertz, the low end of the 5G network, 5G spectrum, the radius drops to the order of the literature that I'm coming across, 800 meters, maybe 500 meters. Yes, that one, yes. Okay. Then should I be doing something with it? Or, oh, there, yes. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so, okay, it's sideways, that's fine. But so the left edge, the bottom side of the image there being the tower, and then the vertical scale in this case representing the distance that you can cover. And so the current towers around St. George, as far as I know, according to the website that plots them, they're in the order of 300 watts per antenna up to 3,000 watts per antenna, depending if it's who the carrier is. I don't know how exactly that's determined. And then on page 5 here, this one, so first of all, yes, distance decreases with frequency. This is the other interesting portion I came across. The 5G band, as I understand it, is defined for North America anyway, covering from 5 gigahertz, which is a horrendously high frequency in an electronic sense, up to on the order of 100 gigahertz. I think it was 198 gigahertz is way up there. Most cell phones now top out at about 2.6 gigahertz, the absolute max for the current 4G. But you can see here, as the plot rises, up is bad in this case, that's losses. So as you get to the 24 gigahertz, for example, water becomes a problem. It blocks the signal. And at 60 gigahertz, oxygen is a huge issue. Huge losses there at around 60 gigahertz. This is the whole reason why, for example, Elon Musk with his Starlink keeps things below 5 gigahertz, or I think he goes slightly above, but most of his stuff's below 5 gigahertz because it just doesn't get through the air, through the atmosphere. And then the issue, of course, being besides water and oxygen, trees are opaque at these frequencies, huge problems. Bugs, insects, it's bad for birds, and chickens don't fly that high, but bees do. So anyway. And then the last, sorry, that's me. The third area of losses, if I may, this chart at the top, if you have a printed copy on page 6 there, basic building materials, concrete and brick, especially fieldstone, is opaque at 4G already. 4G bands, concrete and brick become opaque at anything over 5 gigahertz and things like this. So the solution to these tends to be throwing more power at it. So 5G, we know from field trials in the States and so on, they're talking about pumping twice the power into a 5G phone or a 5G transmitter to get a signal out with, only 800 meters or so range than you would need for 4G. And just for interest, if most cell phones are putting out the transmitters in the order of 300 milliwatt or so, and we typically, if your cell phone's more than, 8 months old or so, we tend to plug it in once a day to charge it. But here we are, 1999, 2001, up to 6 weeks from one AA battery. So something's changed in the efficiency in the industry. So 6 weeks on one AA. Now it's not a cell phone, it is more like just text device. But a RIM 950, 6 weeks versus 1 day on a 4G, and if you had to double the power in a 5G, we're talking probably 4 times the volume in your battery. But just something to be aware of, or plug it in more frequently. Anyway, so that's the issues with the 5G. And also, as the frequency rises, this particular chart here, as the frequency rises, sure, the radius decreases. You can put out more data at higher frequencies, far more data, but because you're not reaching too far, you might as well just use an Ethernet cable eventually. And then you don't have the radiation concerns. So that's that part. No, but the network itself, it's interesting. 4G and 5G devices will have to be able to share towers, 4G towers and for both, and then just 5G towers for the 5G, of course. there's this dynamic spectrum sharing thing. If you're going to use a 5G device on a 4G tower, dynamic spectrum sharing precludes the 5G from doing anything on the tower. He has the 5G devices to wait till the 4G devices are finished, as I understand it from the protocol there. So not that we have no control over that, but that's just a fact. And when you sign up with your provider, Rogers, Telus, Bell, for your 4G phone, and they say you have a, 10 megabyte per second signal for bandwidth for your data plan, it doesn't work that way in 5G. 5G is a shared. So how much data you get through on a 5G connection depends on how many phones are on the tower. You get an average of that. So there's that. And then the fact that 18 to 24-year-olds are dropping smartphones and going back to basic bar phones and so on. Right now, the 5G industry is going through a lot of layoffs worldwide. In February, Ericsson laid off 8,500 people. And just late this past October, Nokia laid off 14,000, both from 5G matters. The stuff's not selling. 5G is not permitted around Canadian airports. 5G, the low end, the 5 gigahertz, 6 gigahertz, isn't the same band as the radar at the airport, so it messes up things for the aircraft. It's a safety issue. So those are the concerns there. Now, with regard to health, if I may, we're up to, what if I go up to page?
Mr. Shav?
Oh, sorry, yes. I'm running out of time.
Again, I don't want to interrupt you, but if you can be relevant
I'll
and perhaps draw your conclusions and presentation to a conclusion within a couple minutes.
Yes, please. Sorry, thank you. Yes. Time flies when you're having fun. So with regard to health, we do know Europe has put all 5G on hold as of September because they have found that the testing didn't properly cover for 5G effects on the human body. The testing has always been done with the phone at 5 millimeters from the head, but if you actually put it in contact, several phones went way over spec. Their specs are much lower than ours. Safety code 6, as far as I know, is a horrendous 2 to 10 watts per square meter. And then the Toronto School Board is down to specifies a tenth of a watt, so they're just a small fraction of safety code 6. They don't want to go with that. But yes, we do have examples in the last few years of bacteria. Some bacteria start to glow in the presence of RF. So there's something that's taking effect there. It's not damaging bacteria, but it does cause. So that's part of the whole realm of everything's slowing down. They're learning that RF does have an effect on biological matter, but what the mechanism is, we don't know yet. That's a $200 billion question. So that's where we would say I'm in favor of not yet. I'm not opposed to 5G, but not as things stand now. Oh, and the other one is, if you do get a base station, we end up with a transmitter every 100 meters down the road, and they could be in the light fixtures and so on, but so we're peppered all over. There's far more of them, but that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I had someone over here indicate they wish to speak. Now is your opportunity. Okay. If you do wish to speak, just come forward, identify yourself and your address, and you have the podium.
Hello, my name is Brent Carey, and my address is 9 Church Avenue. As anyone that doesn't know that address, that is the house that you would see in the background of the tower when you look at it. So, fortunately, if this tower does happen to go up every morning when I wake up, I'm going to look out my front window and see this new tower. So, there's been the other people that have spoke have kind of gone over more facts and studies, where I'd like to kind of go on the aspect of being a new homeowner and more of feelings that is human nature. So there's two aspects of it. One is financials of the tower going up and the effects it has, who it benefits and who it doesn't benefit. The other aspect of it is obviously the concern of the health and safety of this tower being so close to residents. As me being one of the most directly affected, only being 50 meters from the tower that was stated in the presentation from the planner. So I'll start on the first aspect as financials, as I don't see that as important as the health and safety of the human body. So I thought the other day that I had a discussion with my wife that in the next year or so we're discussing of starting a family. And then came the discussion of that if I had the option of buying a house now, as I purchased this house 2 years ago, and there are two identical houses in St. George, one near a tower and one, say, further outside of town that wasn't near a tower. And if I had me and my wife and a family with young children, that if there was two houses identically priced, that I would likely go for the house that wasn't near the tower. Not by any studies or any certain facts, but just due to human nature, gut feeling. So that's one concern I have, being directly in front of the tower, that how is this going to affect me financially in regards to the house if I ever decide to move, which, due to this tower being brought up, has unfortunately brought us to that discussion as we moved from Flamborough, which is Hamilton district, and we're very happy being in Brant County in St. George, but unfortunately we've now had the discussion whether this is something we should move, and that how this is going to financially hurt us in the end, having this tower. Second, in regards to health and safety, again, having the plan of in the next year or so starting a family here in St. George, the small town that we've gotten to know and love, is that a lot of these studies I hear have only been short term and they haven't been long term studies. This raises the concern of my future to be children, ideally, only sleeping within 50 meters of this tower. In the long run, there could be no outcome of it, but I also don't feel like being the test subject of this tower in 20-25 years that I plan to stay here and raise my children, future children, in the nice town of St. George. So that, just talking about it is disturbing to think that I have to decide whether I should stay in St. George or move. That I can't confidently say that I would love to stay in that house for the next 20 years to raise my children, not knowing whether it is going to affect myself or the kids over the long term. So I just kind of wanted to go over those facts that I thought were not as much studies, but were more human nature feelings and just a straight gut feeling as I'm driving or laying in bed at night, knowing that there's the possibility of this tower. So I'd like to thank you for your time, and that there might be the consideration that when you're laying there at night as well, or just driving around and see a tower, that that's a consideration in your gut, that would you buy that house knowing that your kids were sleeping there at night and confidently know that in 25 years that it wouldn't have any effect on you or your children, and that if anything ever did happen, God forbid, that they'd be able to identify it directly to that tower, and if anything would be done about it. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
And we thank you. Anyone else wish to comment on this application? The gentleman over here.
Hi, I'm John Monkhouse. I live on 47 High Street in St. George, which is part of the service that's needed, because we drop calls all the time at our place. So the tower coming in would be very beneficial, because like if a tornado came into St. George, how do we get notified? Is there an air horn? I was actually thinking about that when this was thing. No, you get it on your cell phone. So if you don't have signal, then you won't get it. So that's part of the what happened with the fire hall years ago, right? And that happens anytime. And even with your like the festival, like we do, if we have any more, everything's on cell phone, like the pay or debit. Who has cash anymore? I know everybody's doing Google. Most of this room is older than Google, so we used to read by books. Even I did, even though I was working on computers since I was 10. That's my background. Doing this, I find it interesting that the proposal is that it's 3 times the height of the towers. Whereas we've already mentioned we have Bell and Rogers on Highway 24, and then Bell is on Howell Road on the north, and those are 200-meter poles, like towers. And then we have Freedom Mobile that's on Burt Road. So yes, the north end is covered. I have called Bell many times because I'm with them, and they know that we need a tower at the south end, and that would be a 200-meter pole. So by that default, then it would be about 600 meters from houses, which at all of the locations that we have currently, there's houses. So that's an interesting bylaw. With this, as we mentioned in the presentation, that it is only going to cover about 700 because it's a small cell tower, I believe is what it's called, and it's only going to cover about 900 meters. So yes, and even if you're driving up Franklin up to Dundas, there is the Domino's, which is yes, business and that stuff. There's a pole right behind it. Literally, right on the other side of that fence is a subdivision that's all built everywhere. So, and the thing is, with cell phone towers and Wi-Fi at your home, it's all shared. It's not just 5G. If you have 25 devices, it's all using the same signal. It's using the same power, and that's why you need the more speeds, the more towers together, so you actually have that. And another thing that WHO actually did in 2012, their study with cell phone signals, which of course is over 12 years old. They're doing a research again in 2016 was the refall, but they found that cell phones, even though it's more of that's the radiation that we got to worry about, and you should have it between 30 and 40 centimeters away from your body to actually be safe. Beside that, having it on your body for longer can affect. But that's a whole day long process. And also that same report, they found that if your signal is low, your cell phone is using higher power, which is also causing higher radiation. So actually having a tower in town to provide better signal would actually make cell phones, which is of course is what it's all providing, actually have less radiation, which is of course right on your body, which also protects more the people and the kids because it would be using low power mode. Because of course, like we talked about with the cell phones, you're charging it once a day. If you have no signal, you're charging it a lot more because your cell phone is at that high power use instead of the low power with a full signal. I have done some research on that, and that's all I can find. When there has been towers that have gone up, like the presentation before, it's because of other natural effects, which they said it's low in St. George, which is great. So it's not going to affect adding more radiation frequencies that's already being used with other systems. And that's like, yeah. And I know there's other people, there's never been a petition to have a signal, like have the tower up, but that's been proposed to have one for. I know there's one against, but yeah, that should be started, but never. But that's all I had to say.
And we thank you as well. Again, final comments.
My name is Phil Christie. I've had the privilege to start to do some of the metering in town, and John is wrong. The north end is not all good. The northeast side is overpowered from the, I believe from the bell. Not sure about the water tower that's there. The northwest is lower than the northeast. And what we need to protect is the German school was green to yellow. It's the lowest and the best, and we need to protect those children. Why would we put it in the middle of town? That's ridiculous. They could put a 4G tower outside of town that'll get bigger range, that'll get the signal for all of us. Everybody will be happy. Everybody will be together. Why do we have fighting? That's all I have to say.
And we thank you as well. Any final comments before we conclude the public portion of the public hearing? Yes.
Good evening. My name's Deborah Amadorn. I'm at 29 Scott Street. I have one question for Shared Towers and the Legion, if anybody's here representing them. Who's taking liability if something does go wrong with health issues in town, for the kids or adults? That's what I'd like to find out. Thank you.
Okay. Any final comments? Just a last call. This is your opportunity to express your opinions. Okay, then I'll go back to the applicant if you wish to make any concluding remarks before we proceed to close the public hearing.
Thank you through the chair. In regards to the last question in terms of liability, as I've mentioned during the presentation, these structures are federally regulated and they have to follow Safety Code 6. So I'm more than happy to provide you contact information for ISED or Health Canada. But they're the ones that regulate it. They're the ones that put forth the efforts into these studies. They create these guidelines. So that question would probably be best directed to them, as they're the ones that regulate it. Thank you.
Okay, that is going to conclude the public hearing. I just want to reiterate a couple points. First of all, the council is not the approval agency. It is the agency that comments. The comments that you make to us, we provide them. That's why it's important if you have any written presentations, make sure the clerk gets them so we can forward them on. I want to say that I'm very proud of the people here. It was I expected perhaps I was told that it could get a little out of control, but you are well behaved and a credit to the village of St. George. And I understand that it is an emotional issue for some people, and the gentleman that made the personal observations, I think, are very important to hear, just as much as the technical information. So I'm going to conclude the public hearing and ask the committee how they wish to deal with the application and the recommendation that is before us. Councilor Miller.
Mr. Chair, I'll move the staff report.
And that's seconded by Councilor Bell. And I'm going to read the recommendation, and that is that the clerk be directed to inform Shared Tower that Shared Tower has completed consultation with the County of Brant and the public. And what that means is that we have had public engagement, and the public comments are forwarded on, and that the telecommunications towers as proposed at 9 Main Street North is not in accordance with Section 4.3 preferred location guidelines of the county protocol. So, any discussion to the resolution? Any comments to the resolution? Councilman Calpine.
This is a very challenging situation to find because there is a lot of controversy, I think, on both sides, where there is a definite need in the community for better cell reception and concerns about it. But I respect the concerns that have been brought forward tonight. And I understand that this is around the world a lot of tension, and I can see it doing a lot of good for the community. But at this point, with the staff report saying that it doesn't fit our recommendations for our current status, that I think that I'm going to have to support the staff report, but I would like to see the staff, because this is going to be an ongoing issue, and I think that staff needs to make a closer look at where we place these cell towers so that we can be assured that the safety is of the community is taken into consideration. That I personally believe that the cell towers would be appropriate here, and this would be a safe location for it. But not being an expert, it's hard for me to override what our staff has said. And also, I'd like to reiterate that we are only a commenting committee on this location, and that I do respect the work that our government goes into investigating these issues, and that they do this thoroughly, and because there is thousands of reports that go into on this subject, and the majority do support the safety of 5G. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. And that concludes that particular telecommunications tower. And now we go on to the next one, and that is application it's 7.2 on the agenda with regard to Hatley Road. And the planner is going to come forward and introduce that application. Ladies and gentlemen, if you do wish to leave, please do so quietly. And thank you again for your considerate attendance this evening. Please do not congregate in the alcove because it does echo back here.
We're in an open situation.
Conclude. Let's proceed. The planner is going to introduce this application.
I am presenting telecommunication application CT2-23-HH for 45 Hatley Road. Staff are recommending that the clerks be directed to inform Forbes Rose Ltd. Has completed consultation with the County of Brant and public, and that the telecommunication tower as proposed at 45 Hatley Road is in accordance with the Section 4 Preferred Location Guidelines of the Communication Tower and Communication Antenna Preferred Location Protocol 2020. The subject lands are located south of Hatley Road and west of Middle Town Line Road. The subject lands are located within an agricultural zone which contain an active farming operation. The surrounding land uses consist of agriculture and residential land uses. The subject lands are designated agriculture and zoned agricultural within the County of Brant zoning bylaw 6116. The application is proposing an installation of a 45-meter tall self-support telecommunication structure situated within a 3-meter by 3-meter area. As part of the application, the agent has provided a detailed site selection report and a site plan identifying the proposed tower location and a letter of concurrence request. The preferred setback is 3 times the tower's height, which is 135 meters. The nearest adjacent residential dwelling is 270 meters from the proposed tower. No natural heritage features are located within the county's preferred setback distance of 120 meters. No trees or vegetation are proposed to be removed. To conclude, the application has completed the required public consultation and consultation with the County of Brant, and the application is in keeping with the preferred location guidelines as outlined in Communication Tower Preferred Location Protocol. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Committee members, do you have any questions? Then stand by, and is the applicant here to speak to this application?
Yes, I am here. Jacqueline Johnston.
Who said that?
Can you hear me? Jacqueline Johnston.
Okay, I think we've located you on the internet. Proceed.
Okay, let me share my screen here. Okay, please let me know if you're able to see.
I can see something that says Explore X.
That's the one. All right. Good evening, and thank you for providing me with the time to consider this tower application for concurrence tonight. As mentioned, my name is Jacqueline Johnston. I work for Forbes Bros Ltd. In Government and Public Relations, and I'm here today on behalf of Explore, who have proposed a new tower in Brant County. My goal tonight is to provide some background to the submitted project, an overview of the consultation process, as well as to ask for concurrence on this proposal. A quick note about Explore, for anyone who's unfamiliar. Explore was previously known as ExploreNet and is one of Canada's leading broadband service providers. They deliver broadband solutions to mostly rural customers at home, work, and play across Canada. Explore Broadband is provided through a hybrid network of fixed wireless sites, fiber network, and satellite networks. And the discussion today concerns a fixed wireless portion of that network, which is also known as a broadband tower site. So before we get into the specifics of the site, I want to briefly touch on the higher level purpose of what's being proposed today. In Canada, high-speed broadband internet has been deemed an essential service. It is an essential utility similar to electricity, clean water, and the last few years has really highlighted our reliance on these services. I believe we should consider the service being provided and not just the individual piece of infrastructure, but rather as a part of a larger goal of connecting more rural residents to a strong and reliable internet connection. So in order to continue providing and improving on the broadband services in Brant County, Explore has proposed a new tower facility at 45 Hatley Road. The site selection process can be complex and detailed, and this is due to a variety of reasons. For this specific tower, we had to consider how the tower would communicate with surrounding infrastructure while also maximizing the number of clientele that will receive new or improved services. And we also needed to find a willing landowner to host our infrastructure. On a more micro scale, once we found a willing landowner, this comes with site-specific positioning considerations, primarily surrounding ensuring minimizing any impact to the ongoing agricultural operation of the specific land. This proposed development will use an existing access route to construct and maintain the site, and the tower site for this property is 9 by 9 meter leasehold area towards the northern boundary of the subject property, and the power for the site would be pulled from an existing hydro pole. So we've, as mentioned, have proposed a 45 meter light duty steel lattice support tower. This tower will be 2.7 meters wide at the base and taper in width towards the top. And transmitting and receiving antenna equipment would be mounted on the top half of the structure, and a ground-based equipment cabinet would house any radio equipment, cabling, etc., which is approximately 2.4 meters by 1.8 meters. So this is a photo simulation of the proposed site. Although the proposed structure is tall, it has a textured appearance and low reflectivity. The structure is essentially hollow, which reduces contrast with the backdrop and allows the viewer to see through the structure as opposed to a smooth surface. And at this time, there's no lighting requirements required on this tower. So in Canada, telecommunication and its associated infrastructure are exclusively regulated by the federal government under the Radio Communications Act. The consultation procedures are administered through the Department of Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, also known as ISED. Proponents of new antenna systems are required to consult with the local land use authority and the public for any input at a local level. Brant County, as we all know, has a telecommunication policy in place specific to telecommunication infrastructure, and we followed this process throughout our work with the planning department. We followed the consultation protocol, including posting an ad in the local paper, placing a sign on the property, as well as sending out a mail out to all landowners located within 500 meters of the proposed location. We also had set a time for a public meeting, however, had to cancel due to no registered participants prior to the set meeting time. I did not receive any comments or concerns for this specific tower, and the planning department advised they did not receive any comments either. So in summary, I'd like to ask Council to provide us with a signed concurrence letter for our site at this time, and if there's any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them.
Committee members, do you have any questions? I see no questions, and I see no applicant. Oh, there you are. Okay. Just stand by. Is it Jacqueline? I can't see your last name.
Yes, that's correct. Jacqueline Johnston.
Okay, just stand by. I'm going to ask the members of the public if they wish to comment on this application. Anyone here wish to speak to this application on Hatley Road? And I'm not seeing anything, so there's no sense in coming back to comment. I'm going to conclude the public hearing and ask the committee how they wish to deal with this application. Councillor Bell. And it's seconded by Councillor Miller. Any discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. And that takes us to the next item on the agenda, which are public hearings under the Planning Act to receive information from the public. And the application that is before us is 217 Highway 2 East. And the planner is coming forward to set up to make the presentation. And while she's setting up, is the applicant here? Is that Rashika online? Okay, carry on.
Good evening, committee members. This evening I'll be presenting minor zoning bylaw amendment application ZBA 20-23-ES for 217 Highway 2. presented by the Anglish Group on behalf of owners Samuel Miles and Bronte Pinenberg in the geographic township of Burford. Please note that today's presentation is to be received for information purposes only. So the subject lands are located north of 2nd Concession Road, east of Middle Town Line Road, and south of Highway 2. The subject lands contain an existing single detached dwelling and a decommissioned storage barn, and a demolished silo, which was recently removed as a condition of consent application B14-23-ES. The subject lands are rectangular in shape with a lot area of approximately 49 acres and a frontage of 232 meters. The surrounding area consists of agricultural land uses and low-density residential uses, and they are currently privately serviced. So the applicants previously applied for a surplus farm dwelling severance, which was granted conditional approval by the Committee of Adjustment on July 20th, 2023. As a condition of consent application B14-23-ES, the applicants are requesting to rezone the retained lands agricultural site-specific, or A-194, to recognize the undersized lot area of approximately 19.3 hectares, whereas 40 hectares is required for the agricultural zone, as well as the site-specific zoning seeks to remove permissions to construct a single detached dwelling in accordance with provincial policies and the county's official plan and zoning bylaw. As mentioned, the retained lands will be approximately 19.3 hectares with a frontage of 190 meters. So the subject lands are designated as agriculture within the County of Brant official plan and zoned as agricultural within zoning bylaw 61-16. To date, no comments have been received as part of the public circulation. This presentation is for public information purposes only, and a recommendation will be presented by staff to council next month. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Committee members, any questions? I see no questions. Are you there, Rashika? Is the applicant here?
Yes, good evening. Chair and members of committee, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I do not have any comments or anything to add other than Emily's presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Committee members, any questions to the applicant? Councillor Miller.
Just one, Mr. Chair, through to Rashika. Rashika, just it's an odd shape, or it looks like an odd shape, or is that why is it odd shape? Because I'm seeing it red and then it goes in and then it comes back out. It looks like a chair upside down on my screen. Is that for the buildings on site?
Through you, Chair, yes, it is because of the location of the buildings as well as the well and septic, and that's why there's a little bit of an angle to the property shape.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, I see no other questions from the committee. Rashika, just stand by, and I'm going to ask members of the public. This is your opportunity to make comment on this proposal. Is there anyone in the audience wish to comment on this application? Anyone? No one. Okay, that makes it easy, Rashika. There are no comments from the public at this point, so there's nothing further that's required from yourself. And if there's nothing further from the planning staff, I will declare the public hearing closed and ask the committee how they wish to deal with the application. Councillor Coleman.
So move the recommendation, Mr. Chair.
And Mayor Bailey seconds it.
Yep.
Any final questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And that will come forward at the next cycle. Consent items, nothing to be approved. There is a report with regard to parking. There is a recommendation on the agenda. Would someone feel comfortable in moving that to put it on the table? Councillor Coleman, seconded by Councillor Kyle. Any comments or discussion? It's an information report. another step in the process. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you. I don't want to prolong the evening, but a question to Brandon. As always, great report. Thank you very much. To what extent is it going to apply in the remaining developments in Paris? Where can we really make a difference? My suspicion is that most of the developments in Paris are already out of the gate and would not be affected by this. Is that a correct assumption?
Trying to be proactive about, but you can't necessarily make the changes during the development.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if Lucas can hear, but I can't hear him.
Red is actually mute. When it's off, it's live.
Brandon, could you come over to the podium?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sorry. No? There we go. Green. So it's red over there and green over here. Okay. I think I've got this. All right. Through the chair to Councillor Bell. So that is a correct assumption. There isn't too much that we can do for the developments that have already been proposed or approved. Sorry. But there are some changes that we're proposing through the zoning bylaw that will hopefully help kind of mitigate that a little bit with driveway widenings and such. And we are working closely with our bylaw enforcement folks as well. Just with respect to the on-street parking. So there are some things that we can do, but not a lot.
Any other comments or questions with regard to the report? Then the motion is before us. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And the next item has already been dealt with, 10.1, communications, none. Committee reports, the Agricultural Advisory Committee has a report. Would someone move that report be received? Mayor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Kyle. Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. No other business, is there? Notice of motion.
First moving done.
Councillor Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to introduce this at the upcoming council meeting at the end of the month.
Would you say that again, Lucas? I didn't hear what you said.
For certain, through the chair, unless committee desired me to read through the notice of motion, I'm happy to talk about it at the end of the month at our council meeting.
Okay, I just want to make a comment. It's a notice of motion that, according to how it works in my mind, it's a notice of motion for this committee. So the motion will be presented at this committee next month if we follow the protocol. I think you want it to be introduced at the council meeting at the end of the month. Is that correct?
Yes, through the chair.
Okay, it's not proper to give a notice of motion in a committee for another body. You wouldn't introduce this motion at the Social Services Committee, for example, to be placed on the council agenda, so you shouldn't introduce the motion here. What you should do is present the motion at a council meeting. I understand that timing is an issue. So what I suggest you do is just, under other business, at our council meeting following, introduce it then, and I'd be prepared to make a motion to waive notice, and we can deal with it, and then it doesn't have to wait to the next planning committee meeting, and then the next council meeting, which will be just before Christmas. I think that's the concern. One way or the other, your motion is going to get addressed before Christmas, but to do it this way isn't the way it should be done. I'm going to ask the clerk to speak loud so everyone can hear with regard to this.
Through Chair Chambers to committee. So practice that we have been doing due to timelines is, yes, strict procedural protocol would suggest that at the council meeting the previous month we would give notice, and then the following month we would give resolution. However, due to leniency in terms of timelines, practice which we've been doing is providing notice during committee meetings, and then the resolution will appear as a resolution on the council meeting at the end of the month. So what I was suggesting to Councillor Chambers with regards to his recommendation, that the notice of motion be attached to the first council meeting of the month, which makes sense timeline-wise. My recommendation against that was when we created the first council meeting of the month immediately following planning, within the procedural bylaw, the amendment was that council meeting only meets to hear Planning Act related items. Restricting that, the concern was that essentially it would become a second council meeting, so we would essentially have 2 full council meetings a month. And so when the planning council was created, it was created with the restriction in the procedural bylaw that only planning related items could be heard, Planning Act relating items could be heard at that council meeting, which is why the tower applications, which committees heard tonight and made a decision on, will appear as a report at the end of the month council as opposed to next month's planning council, because they're not Planning Act related applications, they're tower protocol applications. So that explains why some things appear on the planning council and some things do not. So I would suggest that unless we want to hard and fast to, notice of motions are provided the month before, we allow them notice at least to be given during committee meetings.
And again, strictly speaking, notice of motion should not be made in one committee and then for the other committee. So what I suggest you do, Councillor Oakley, is move a motion that this particular resolution be added to the council meeting agenda of whatever the council meeting is this month. And that solves the issue. Councillor Miller.
Would it be acceptable, through to the clerk, speaking to your point, to put that notice motion on the council meeting that follows planning, because we do have a council meeting after.
We just said we can't do that because that's a special council meeting.
Oh, right. We can't add stuff to but that agenda is published though, like it's a special meeting. My understanding is if it's special, we got to deal with what's on it. But if you get it on there,
so through Chair Chambers to Councillor Miller, so it's not special within the meanings of the procedural bylaw. So special meetings are called for particular reasons. The first planning council of the first council of the month, the planning council, is a regular council meeting, just the business has been restricted to only Planning Act related items. So Councillor Oakley could add something to that, but he would require an exception for the procedural bylaw.
The easiest way to do it is for Councillor Oakley to move a motion now, and I'm sure there would be a seconder, to place this motion on the next council meeting. And he moves that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bell. Any questions? This resolution will be on our council agenda as business brought forward by Councillor Oakley with a suggested recommendation. That puts it on our next council meeting, which is the intent. So all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Lucas, be prepared to speak to it at our council meeting where you'll see it on the agenda. Mayor Bailey.
Mr. Chair, just before we close this meeting, you accepted the named petitions for the people against the tower, and the first and second page are the same. So just make it a note, please, Madam Clerk, that the first 2 pages were identical. So 31 of their names appear twice.
Okay.
Just
That was added to the addendum. That's why it was okay, and that's noted. Now that actually there is in camera none. Doesn't seem right, but there's no in camera session, which is good. And that takes us to the next meeting and adjournment. But before we get to the adjournment part of that, the next meeting will be the meeting where we elect a chair. So I thank committee members for allowing me to be chair for 2023. I look forward to not being the chair. And I am sure that the vice chair is going to be nominated by myself to be the new chair. And I wish him well, and I would thank the committee members for making my job as chair easy this year. Keep in mind the procedural bylaw says that chairs need to rotate through the committee, so someone should be having in their mind that they wish to be vice chair. So that'll happen at our next meeting, which is on December 12th. And now